What is up? Welcome. How are we doing? All right, what do I have in store? Okay, perfect. Sorry for the delay. Apologize. I'm still trying to when my camera went off, like out of the blue on me earlier, bringing that back, I don't know. So apologize. So what is up? Sorry for the delay. Oh, back. Yes. Make yourself known. Let's do a little something like this, though. We're going to jump right into it. But first, let's see. Here we go. Okay. So we have a couple things we're going to cover, which is the Idaho State Police Forensic. Well, it's the Idaho State Police Manual, the new crime scene manual personnel, 2024, 192 pages. Property of the Idaho State Police Forensic Services. The reason this is kind of important is because this is going to be really, really important for this case. Those of you guys who have been following me, I have made it perfectly clear that Idaho State Police, for whatever reason, as well as local law enforcement, they struggle. During the Moore case, showed you guys how they just, they didn't take proper pictures. They didn't take things into evidence, like the stool that the good doctor was sitting on, allegedly when he was shot through the window, to see if, in fact, where he would have been, where his, body would have been behind the, the window. They didn't measure how far off the ground the stool. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Things that they didn't do. But here, we're going to show, to start things off, Steve.
I guess, first of all, just how are you and your family doing right now?
Right now, it's a good day. I mean, we got a large document upload. The more information we have, the better we feel. It's 2.5 years into, wait on some of these pieces of information that we've been hearing about from the day that this happened. It just feels good to have it out. And I've always believed that the truth will set you free, and you should never hide factual information that the jury's going to be presented. It's just stuff that you, regardless of it, you're gonna see it. And it's the things that a gag order leads to, where people start going to alternative media and starts finding these, they call it speculation, but it's just lies. It's just people making up theories. So it's nice to have true factual information out there for people to digest, go over, and analyze, because there's a lot there. There's a lot to go over, and these are dark days for the defense.
I guess, speaking of, it seems like there's a new piece of information that comes out constantly about what happened that night. For you, as the father of Kaylee, I mean, how is that? Do you brace yourself for each piece of information that comes out? I mean, how does that work for you?
This was released before Cyray's. Well, actually, let me take that back. This was technically released after Cyray's affidavit, but I don't believe that Steve had seen it, because based on the way that it was dropped. They put this out on Sunday, Seattle did, evening, and obviously Cyray dropped his stuff on Friday. But I believe that this interview was conducted before Sunday. They didn't just put it out there on Sunday night.
This is my family, so I expect to take on a brunt of that information, so it gives me a chance to be the father. Olivia's right there with me. She's headstrong, very headstrong, so she's digging into the docs. She's probably sent me 2 or 3 docs since we've been on this interview. So it allows me to be back in control of some of the things that are regarding my family.
So there you go. That's a pretty good indication that there wasn't docs that were dropped on Sunday when this came out. So, I do believe that this was recorded probably... I would say maybe the 24th of March.
And you see all these strangers just take your life and dangle it in front of you and just tell you, you're going to go here, you're going to go there, you're not going to see this, this is going to be sealed. It's a hard experience to go through. But, like I said, today's a good day, and it's nice to have true information out, something to digest, something new, something that collaborates what you've been hearing the whole time. So it's good when these pieces all come together. But it's a struggle. 2.5 years is a long time to wait.
I agree. Now, do you see how his hand just moved where he was? This is how choppy it is. So
been hearing the whole time. So it's good when these pieces all come together. But it's a struggle. 2.5 years is a long time to wait.
I can't even imagine what
Right
you all
there.
have been through.
So this is really heavily edited. But I agree with Steve. 2.5 years is a very long time. No doubt about it. But I kind of question the stuff that's coming out is what we've been told from the beginning. Just because something has been told to you doesn't make it the truth. I don't see anything in these documents that helps what they were told. In fact, I see stuff in the documents, if you actually look at the Federal Bureau of Investigation report, especially with the car identification, this was heavily wordy based on Ashley Jennings and the motions that they put in and how they worded things. But the FBI never, ever once claimed to have identified any vehicle from 1112.
I know recently, the 911 call came out. I guess, first of all, how was that for you and your family when you first heard it?
Honestly, it's terrible. My wife never wanted to hear it. She still doesn't
I don't want to talk about the 911 call. It's horrible. They shouldn't
deal with
that's
it. I have a whole new respect for people who can sit here in front of a camera and speak articulately and hit all the points, never make any mistakes. It's not an easy thing to do. People think that this is all scripted, but a lot of times this is live and it's one and done, and these are the things you don't want to know about. But when a tragedy like this happens, you catch up and you get into, you get in a whole another mode. But I really feel for those girls. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. They had nothing to do with this. 19 years old. I mean, put yourself in a 19-year-old's perspective. How many times have you heard something, you thought something was a noise you heard in the backyard or noise you heard in the front of your house, and you went to bed, you didn't mind anything, and then the next day you wake up and you notice that, your window was broken or something happened. You kick yourself, say, I heard something, but I just talked myself out of it. I didn't have any idea that it was something legit. I think these girls probably feel something like that, or that's a close.
I think he's comparing oranges to apples here.
Thing that I can, put myself in perspective, but I know for a fact that my own daughter had scenarios where she felt like her life was in danger and she called me rather than call 911. So
Well, that's a different thing that he's ever said, because he said that if Kaylee would know if she was in danger, she would call 911. So that was what he said back in the day. And now, hey, there's been a time that she's been in danger. She called him. And I think what he's referring to is the fact that Bethany called her parents at, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And then Dylan, but why would you call at 7 o'clock in the morning if you didn't know anything yet? You understand?
19 years old, I wouldn't expect anything other than what happened. And I think those detailed records show exactly what happened.
They're not 19 years old. So I don't know why he's referring to them as being 19.
Exactly where they are. People don't realize that when you combine that with the CAS system, they know exactly what happened on those phones. And it's a perfect timeline that tells them everything that happened.
Okay, so this is so weird, him talking about the cast. Again, he did not know that Cyree was going to be dropping what he dropped. But talking about the cast, I don't even think Cass did anything with the girls. We can't even get a cast report on Brian Kohberger. We just have a probable cause affidavit that says this, and now we find out that it's not true.
Happened that night and the following day.
Are you in contact with them? Have you talked with them since this 911 call came out?
Not really. I'm going to leave it at that, but I think they've kind of reached out in a proxy way. So
I don't even know what that means. Have you talked to them at all? That's a yes or a no. So the answer is no.
Yeah. And then the courts kind of tell us, what they're thinking and what they're going through. So we know a little general aspect of it. I
would have just said no there if I hadn't talked to anybody.
But I think they've kind of reached out in a proxy way. So yeah. And then the courts kind of tell us, what they're thinking and what they're going through. So we know a little general aspect of it. I was asked to give.
Then the courts are telling you what the witnesses are thinking and doing. I couldn't even believe this comment. The courts aren't supposed to be telling anybody anything. There's a gag order. I'm just totally confused. So he's admitting that the courts are telling him what the roommates are going through right now. Do you understand that that would need to be if the courts or anybody from the state has talked to the roommates, those are witnesses, that has to be documented. There would have to be a report written up that you had communication with them. I mean, I just, that's not accurate. Or if it is, I'm telling you that they need to document that. Anytime that you would be talking like that, you write up a report. So if I'm Ann Taylor right here, I'm making a note that, and I'm doing a request, and I'm doing a discovery request, and I'm asking the state for the reports of the state talking to the witnesses and what came of that.
Give a little bit of a heads up because, you know, me and Christy have spent a lot of time, you know, praying and talking to the girls. And one thing that we kind of got a real overall feeling was we could do more to protect the victims and help them get through this and not be the victims outside of their behavior. You know, don't attack them. Don't have them.
I agree. Nobody should be attacking them.
To make sure people understand they had nothing to do with it. It is what it is. All these digital records support exactly what happened.
I have no idea. I'm just shocked here. All this digital stuff support. I struggle with this. It doesn't. Dylan said that she went to bed at between 3 and 3:20, like she fell asleep. Now, if you want to get to the semantics and say, well, I said I went to bed at 3 or 3:20. It doesn't mean I went to sleep. Seriously? Okay. That's fine. Okay. Well, 3:51, the person on the main level was storing something in her phone, contact that had never come out in anything.
You couldn't have.
And nor did the state put that out. Okay. It was when the defense had to put their documents in, did that come out? Okay. The state didn't show any of that.
Walk down the street and not had those FBI agents and the systems that they put in place there. They probably know exactly what floor they were on, when they went up, when they went down. The technology they have is amazing. So all these people who are so-called speculators just lying to you. The truth is they know exactly where those girls were, exactly what they were doing, and they had nothing to do with this. They did everything that I would expect from a 19-year-old girl that was going through a weird scenario where at 10 o'clock the next day, she's checking her resume for a job. They had no clue. So, look at those little details and, put yourself in their perspective. And, if you can't handle it, go find another case to follow, find something else to do because we don't want you attacking them.
Steve, we were talking about those, filings that were coming out, right? And how there's so many of them coming out. I know you've been paying close attention to them. In one of them recently, they talked about alternative perpetrators and how there could be dozens of others who could be behind this. What are your thoughts on that? Do you still think they have the right guy?
Oh, I know they have the right guy. The DNA under, Maddie's leg, under a blanket. You don't.
The DNA under Maddie's leg, under the blanket. What he is referring to is that the sheath, the DNA under the leg,
get your DNA at a crime scene when you have nothing to do with the crime scene. And then it just happens to have surveillance of like 5 cameras that have your white car driving around. How many?
See, and I feel bad right there because, yeah, you guys, why would you have Steve has no reason not to believe what Ashley Jennings has told him. He has no reason not to believe what these police officers looked them in their eyes and told them. Okay. Can you imagine being lied to? Like, I'm sorry, but I feel for Steve. Like,
teenagers do you know, or somebody that's 28 who just turned their phone off in the middle of the night with 90-some% battery life? And it's my understanding that they know how the phone was turned off. So this individual went out that night. The chances of you driving around that night are pretty slim. 240 something.
3,800 people's cell phones were on the one cell tower of AT&T that were being utilized during 3 and 5 a.m.
and he left his house, turns his phone off, and goes and does some convert stuff. Look at this guy thinks he's
Turned his phone off and went and did some convert stuff. See, this is where I wonder, I'm like, where's Steve getting his information from?
smarter than Idaho. He thinks he's, he's way above us. And
Smarter than Idaho is like Idaho, like period. I've never seen so many things where it's got to be like states are against each other. Like, I don't know.
He's going to get away with it. He's going to trick everybody. He's got his PhD, fancy degree, and he thought he could come out here and kill and get away with it, become some kind of famous serial killer. But I don't think it's going to end well for him. And I think he's going to realize that Idaho doesn't play, and he's got some scary days ahead of him.
How do you feel about, these autism claims and, trying to remove the death penalty off the table?
For as smart as he was really stupid. I hate to say it, but if he would have did those crimes in Washington, he would be looking at a whole different reality. He would not be looking at the death penalty. He would not be looking at people that are really going to be engaged in the case at the level that they are. The reason this case is blown up is because in Idaho, we really care, and we don't take a murder like this, lightly. And people being killed in their bed while they're asleep, going to school, trying to improve their lives. That's like the last place you should actually be, facing a circumstance like that.
I would agree with all of those things. But so basically, if he's saying this has happened in Washington, it wouldn't be like this. I don't know how Washington people feel about that. I could tell you, I don't care what state you're in. If somebody comes into your house and kills you in your bedroom, like, who the fuck do you think you are, right? I don't think it's a state thing.
So, I think he was kind of foolish. He was kind of foolish. And the only thing that makes sense to go from one state that you live in that doesn't have the death penalty to one that does have it by choice means that he disrespected everybody that is a citizen in Idaho. And he thought that we wouldn't have the conviction to follow this case all the way through. And the risk of going to a death penalty state made more sense for him. That was a strategy that he used that is still going to be played out to this day to figure out how bad of a move that truly was.
So Steve thinks it was a strategy for him to go to across the country and to go commit the murders in a death penalty state.
Was.
I know out of a lot of the families, you've been there, front and center. You've been at different hearings and throughout this entire time. What is it like for you when you see Kohberger in court?
You want to do all kinds of illegal things that you're not supposed to even talk about, but you can think about them. Crimes of the mind. At least that's not illegal yet. But
wait, actually, that's interesting that you say that, because this whole click Amazon thing to me, okay, so I have a question for you guys. I was thinking about this. All right. If I was to go to Kohl's and, you guys get your cart and then you start pushing your cart around and you start grabbing things like, I really like that. Okay, I'm going to get that. I'm going to get this. And then you start, you see something else and then you're like, oh my gosh, no, I'm going to get that, because you have like this little budget in mind. And so things are going in and out of your cart, like that you're pushing around, and you're on surveillance camera, right? And so then you go into, let's say, the dressing room where there is no camera. Then you come out and you maybe put some things away, maybe grab something else, But when it's all said and done, when you go up to the cashier, and by the time you got there, you still have a cart full of stuff. But let's say that, okay, hey, I'm not going to get some of these things, but here, just ring up these. But here, I just want to at least give this to you guys because I don't want to like litter your store or whatever. And I only get 2 items, right? And so if you were to ever get a business receipt, right, it would just have the 2 items that I ever purchased. Like, that's what you guys, like the government, the police, whatever, see if they ever went and got my receipt. They wouldn't know, right? They would have to get the surveillance cameras to see, I guess, me putting certain things in my cart and I guess taking them out. But you don't know why I'm taking things out and putting them in, or then I go to the dressing room and maybe this stuff didn't fit. But at the end of the day, there is no to see things that I clicked off on, moved in, moved out, whatever it may be. If I accidentally click something, if I accidentally grab something, or my kid throws something in the cart, at the end of the day, here's my receipt of just the items that I bought. That's all you would have. Right? And so even if somebody watched me, it would be all speculation on why I was putting things in my cart, why I was taking things out of my cart, unless I was telling you why Oh, and then when I got up to the register, I was like, oh my God, this is way over $100. Like I can't afford this. Or to think that, oh, I had on my card at one point, let's say, I don't know, a black sports bra, and then I don't have it, right? But where did it go? Because it was in my cart the whole time. Oh, she went to the dressing room. She had to have stole that. It's not there anymore. It went when what? First of all, it's just crazy to me. About the whole, like, you're only going to get my receipt, especially if it's like years or months later. So to think that you know anything about me from of what I put in or out of my cart, I just.
It's hard, it's terrible,
Wow.
You're put in a position to protect your family, and you have one of the worst days of your life, and you just keep having to relive it over and over and over until, it gets itself through the process, so it's terrible. But in some ways I was built to handle the kind of, hate and grief that you get for this. And I feel, in a way, I'm glad that the other families that came forward and just said, hey, Steve, run with it. It's you have it. If you can handle it, then, go ahead and speak freely. So I have that flexibility to know that I'm speaking for some other people, and these, especially with Maddie Mae. I mean, that was my girl, and we tell people we didn't lose one girl, we lost two, and it's just more work for us to do, more reasons for me to speak out, and come home from work and sit here, fire up a computer, and do a little interview. It's the least I can do for what those victims went through that night. It really is an honor for me to be able to talk to them and bring some clarity to the facts. But really, that's what we're talking about today, is things that came out of court, not speculation, not rumors. These are things we really
actually, nothing came out of court. It was court documents right now, and people are doing filings. And what we're learning from all of these documents is this is going back and forth for the motion in limine. But truly, what we're learning, if you're really looking at the docs, and that's why I'm going to pull up. Well, I'll let him finish.
Really should be pointing to, and it's a weird, sometimes an upside down world where courts feel like pressured to hide the evidence, and I'm still not fully understanding why that's a good strategy.
Courts aren't hiding the evidence as much as we want to know everything at the same time. There is stuff that gets sealed based on if it's going to be even admissible. So you don't want the jury to see stuff that may never even make it through the court doors in a trial. That's the only purpose for ever truly to, like, if you have to do something under seal, that's the only purpose that it should ever be for, is that, other than that, yeah, transparency is supposed to be through our courts.
If the facts of a case make you feel guilty, or it makes other people think you're guilty, chances are you're guilty,
You were talking about.
And we don't know what the facts of the case are yet. The facts are heavily disputed by both sides. So the prosecution and the defense it's very, very heavily disputed what the facts are. Just because something is written in a motion doesn't make it true.
The facts of the court and coming out in documents and whatnot. I believe there was one document recently that came out that talked about, I think it mentioned, a family member, perhaps you, of Kaylee's, that was wearing a shirt talking about the firing squad. Have you seen that? What are your thoughts of that, of being kind of named specifically or pointed out when it comes to things like that?
There's going to be these weak attempts of people to try to silence us. They want to silence.
Weak attempts of people to try to silence. Nobody has attempted to silence Steve or his family. I disagree with that. I think that every platform has given him the opportunity to speak. But I didn't see anybody. I was in Delphi, and I didn't see anybody wearing pins or shirts saying that Richard Allen should be shot.
Somebody who's a vocal aspect of the case, and I'm not worried about it. It has nothing to do with us. I have never worn anything. I don't even know what the details are of that. I would love for someone to show me some proof of that, and don't show me some picture of us walking around the courtroom, outside of the courtroom, with some shirt, because I'll wear whatever I want. That's my right as an Idaho citizen.
I agree. See, it's his right as an Idaho citizen to do. That's First Amendment, right? And I'm a firm believer on that. It was about stuff that they just didn't want it to be coming into the courtroom. But I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment. So I agree with Steve. I think that Steve should wear whatever the fuck he wants around the courthouse.
Member of America. We can wear whatever we want out in public, but we don't wear it in the courtroom. So,
well, unless you're in in Boston right now, they have a buffer zone.
You know, that's just a tactic. But if they're focused on me, then they're not focused on the real important issues. So whatever, you know, it doesn't bother me one bit.
Last week, Idaho, the governor signed the bill into law that the firing squad is now the main primary execution method. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a dark subject matter, but Idaho deserves people to do the best that they possibly can to represent them and to address things like this. So it's a harsh reality. You know, unfortunately, we have people that come from states like Pennsylvania and kill us. You know, it sucks. You know, another person in Pennsylvania went and shot at the president. Another one in Pennsylvania went and shot a CEO. But the best thing you can do in those type of situations is have the infrastructure.
Luigi was not from Pennsylvania. Number one. Wow. Steve is not happy with Pennsylvania. That's all I can tell you from this interview.
And the politicians that want to support everyone and make sure that, you know, we set an example that this isn't a place where we're going to tolerate this type of behavior. You know, everybody makes mistakes. You know, it's not like a traffic accident or a drinking and driving or drugs or something like this. This is somebody playing God and ending people's lives. So we got to make a determination. Is this something that we're going to draw a line in the sand and be done with this type of decision making? And I think Governor Little, he's an amazing man. You know, he sees what happened to a group of his citizens, and he put it in action. And that's what you want from a politician. You want a politician that sees something happen to his community, and he doesn't sit about it and cry about it and talk about it and moan about it. He goes and he changes things. He addresses the law to address what's happening to his citizens. And I think we're pretty lucky to have a guy like that in a position as a governor. So I'm glad to see that he's went forward with that.
You talked about, losing two girls. For folks who may not have known Kaylee and Maddie, what were they like?
Two girls that were like friends that became sisters. They both met at a private little charter academy, which was like a nightmare to them. They had to wear like uniforms, and these are two girls that probably like dreamed of looking with fashion and style going to school, and they had to wear these uniforms. So I think Maddie had something in her hair, and it caught Kaylee's attention. She thought, if she's wearing something like that, she's pretty inclined to like the same things as she did. And I think they started talking about girl stuff, like Taylor Swift, both fans. So they hit it off, and they've been friends ever since. So I've told other people we've taken trips across the into different countries. Kaylee went to Hawaii with them for at least a week. So these girls were very close. They were like sisters, and to this day we have questions of like details, and we're always thinking we can go out and ask Maddie Mae, and we're like, we can't. That's when it hits you, is when you're thinking like, who could confirm what she was wearing, what she was doing, and you always think of Maddie. And I know that Karen said the exact same thing, where she's got something that she needs to know about her daughter, and her first person to think of is Kaylee. And then you realize at that moment that you've really been hit. You've kind of been sucker punched with two different people that are supposed to be in your lives. My son and my sisters, these are people that were at their weddings. These were their best friends for life. So yeah, 100% we lost two people that were part of our lives, and we're supposed to be a part of our lives to the very end. So that's why we're focused on this case.
I'm so sorry. What do you miss most?
Just their laugh, their playfulness, the hugs when they were about to come into the room, the hugs when they were going to leave the room. If the kids were ever going to go somewhere, even if they're going to run to the store to buy something, we would give that hug. Always left saying we love them. And that's why I know the last thing I ever said to my daughter was I love her. When she jumped in her car and went down to a dance and had a dance, she was a dance participant with one of the people that survived. That's how close of a friends they were. These guys were all good friends. So, hopefully people can put that in perspective and understand that, there's only one bad guy, and that's who we should be focused on. Go look at these facts of the case. Go look about, the white car, the surveillance, the K-bar that showed up at his house, the multiple witnesses that's seeing him in possession of it. Go look at that. And then, that's what you should pay attention to. None of the stuff that people are saying.
I don't know what people are saying. That's exactly what we're looking at. So I'm confused. I don't know what other people are talking about, but that's exactly what we're talking about over here. We're looking at the car. We're looking at the surveillance. So we're going to bring up then, let's see. Now, what he means, I believe, when he says the K-bar showed up at his house, is him referring to Brian Kober's Amazon purchase, I guess, because it was bought so far in advance that it came to his house in Pennsylvania. So, yeah, that's what I think, what he means. But now, hold on. Let's take a look at this. Okay. Ooh, okay, hold on. Can you flip that over there? All right, guys, so I created this document. I'm gonna make it bigger and let me then clear it all up. All right, so what the defense is seeking from the motion limine. So I went ahead and took a clip, and in a nutshell, these documents, go read the documents. The inflammatory evidence is just the extra, that's basically already been handled. The vague and undisclosed expert testimony, that's a big part of it, because in a criminal case, you have to disclose your experts and what they're going to testify to. Otherwise, they won't be testifying as experts. So the defense is wanting there to be people that are ixnayed on the state side, who these so-called experts are. Then the defense says that this has been handled, the terms of boom, handled, boom, handled. They're not going to be doing that. So the state agrees. The inconclusive data, it's the language with the fingernails and the likely ratio. It's about language. It's not to not have that. It's just the language. Then Rylan with the touch DNA and contact DNA, and it being referred to as, trace. Defense then, witness identification for the bushy brows. This has been handled with a 404B evidence. They just have to go through the rules. Excluding Amazon clicks, and we're going to get to that part because it has to do pretty much with like a warrant. Also, I went back and looked. So it's pretty interesting. Excluding the IgG, and then the make and model of the suspect vehicle, it's very simple. Nowhere does the expert say that he identified from 1112 the car. So we want to make sure that doesn't get said. And then, so with that said, we're going to talk about latent print here. But first, hang tight. Let me make this a little bit brighter. Okay, so I went back and looked at this whole Amazon with the dude. The defense is saying that this expert Cox, he is not an expert and what they're going to be trying to have him testify to, if the defense is reading this right, and this is what they're arguing is just in a nutshell right there, is Mr. Culver believes that the state intends to use Amazon evidence to prove elements of its case. To allow such in the face of the explanation above and the failure to disclose would be unconstitutional and in violation of the rules of evidence. They never provided a report from this man. This is just the guy that pulled the records to give them to the police with the search warrant. Okay. And so that's where it's like, is Shane, can Shane Cox be an expert? We don't even have a report from him. And then the other thing I think is interesting is that when they would have done this search warrant, we have it as that they did the search warrant, and when they asked for the Amazon, that were they specific to just say, because think about this, because this was going to be one of my questions for Bob Mata, is when they did the search warrant, did they only ask for purchases of a knife / accessories? Or did they specifically say, we're looking for purchases between this period and this period, and it's anything from the accounts? Because remember, Ann Taylor's over here saying that we only have these little transactions. We don't have the big picture of everything. And so then therefore, if you have a big picture of it, we can then, when you're showing the jury that, well, oh, look at you bought all this other stuff because you're going camping for a camping trip, right? So my question was this, is if I was a investigator, right, and I made up a search warrant and I only went and got the knife and the accessories purchases, but then I try to come through and try to explain the clicks, but the clicks has to do with like your trends as a shopper. How is that even, like, you can't even show that because you would need all of the purchases, So I wanted to ask, Bob Mata that. And then I was going to follow up with saying, okay, well, let's say that is the case, that how could then Ann Taylor go about, does she, as a defense attorney, go in and say, okay, I need to go and get a Deus Tecum subpoena for Amazon so that they can then produce what the state didn't go and get. We're going to go get ourselves, and we're going to do that through a Deus Tecum subpoena for a third party. So that's that. It wasn't produced after they did it through the federal grand jury, though. Then Moscow Police Department did it, and that's how Moscow Police Department knew what to go ahead and look for. But it's interesting on the dates, and that was something that I was going to show to Bob, is that the dates that you're stopping looking for this secondary, or this replacement knife sheath, why wouldn't you go all the way to the 29th before the arrest? Why would you stop before then? Well, that tells me that you put in the warrant or the subpoena or whatever on the day that's the last day of whenever you're serving it. Because if you did this truly after the fact, why wouldn't the Moscow Police Department, if they have no idea what the returns were, have no idea that, anything about that, you'd be putting in these dates and you would go all the way to the point that he was arrested. And that's just not what happened. And then I was planning on asking Bob about the relevancy, because the argument is the relevancy on, it's two parts, which is the incompleteness of evidence and then the relevancy of what is, especially for me, if that's not the knife and the knife sheath that is supposedly at the crime scene, the sheath, if it's not the same one, then what would be the relevancy in that? Just to show the jury that he bought a knife and knife sheath before. So I'm curious as far as that would go as well. Next up is So since the prosecution did not get Cox's report in or anything like that, it's way past this deadline, 3 months. If they don't have a expert to testify to this, wouldn't it just be, what I was going to ask Bob is this, wouldn't it just be ixnayed right then and there if they didn't meet their disclosures? Yes, the state subpoenas or the search warrants were after the federal grand jury. That is correct. Okay. But they knew about what dates to ask for because of the federal grand jury subpoenas. But more importantly, is there was something that happened even before then. That's what I'm trying to get at, is because you would never, in January of 2023, if you're serving a federal grand jury subpoena, okay, on Amazon, why would you stop? Why would you only go from March 20th to March 30th? And then why would you go from from November 1st until December 13th? And then when the Moscow Police Department did theirs, they only went to December 6th. If you're looking for that replacement and you're serving it well after December, you would go all the way to the 29th, would you not? That's exactly right, Detective Mowry. Yes, that's true. And the state asked for only super specific warrant so that they wouldn't have to disclose the surrounding information to the defense. Absolutely. So that was my question about Mata, though, is could then the defense put in a Deus Tecum subpoena? And I believe that you can. But should you have to? Should you have to? Should it be like this? All right. And so the defense is saying, for the reasons addressed above, Mr. Culver respectfully requested this court grant his motion limine to exclude any Amazon and Amazon click activity evidence because it is improperly isolated, out of context, does not take into account advertising influence and all these things that Ann Taylor went out and got herself an Amazon expert based on the fact that the state disclosed in December of 2024 that, hey, we're going to have this person as an expert, but never disclosed anything as far as a report or opinions or anything. And that's just not how you do that. My next question was going to be to Bob Mata, which is can you file a motion to reconsider as far as Cy Ray and David Howell to be able to testify on the defendant's behalf? And the reason that I brought that up here is because David Howell is the Amazon expert. Would you want to file that? After Cy Ray's affidavit, is there anything else that can happen after that you would want to do to preserve something? So that was my next question. Now, Cox is the person from Amazon that provided the COA, which is a certificate of authentication, and turned over the material requested in the search warrant. Does this make him a quote unquote Amazon expert? He just handles the legal, or when you have the law enforcement requests, he worked his way up and that's, his role. Is the defense saying that the state only gave partial returns, or did the search warrant only request the knife purchase / accessories? I was going to be quizzing Bob Mata there, but, and then to ask him, but since he's not here, we'll be moving on. And this is what the state disclosed when they gave their disclosures in December, and to say that Mr. Cox Amazon testimony must be excluded, or I'm sorry, this is what Ann Taylor comes back and says, because you gave us a name. And in January, when they had that hearing that we all got to watch, like the deadline's passed. We have no reports. So the defense is saying that for this Cox guy, Amazon, the testimony must be excluded because no opinion or full analysis of the data has been provided. It appears Mr. Cox has credentials to gather data at Amazon, but nothing disclosed indicates he has the expertise to form an opinion on data. And if he does have an opinion based on analysis, neither the analysis or opinion has been disclosed. The full amount of raw data received from Amazon has never been disclosed. Only narrow dates with some purchases have been disclosed, despite warrants seeking very broad materials. So, and then I was going to tell Bob, so right here, basically, Anne is saying that she is in physical possession and knows that these warrants were seeking broad. But then here, we know what the warrants were seeking. And then here, what you've just provided us is only just such minuscule shit that, and then the defense is like, well, yeah, it's just, here's the knife and the knife. Like, this is what we're relying on. I don't give a fuck what you're relying on. We get everything. So then we can go through it. So apparently there's an Excel spreadsheet, apparently relied upon the state. They have redacted purchases without explanation. I think that that's crazy that there'd be any type of redactions when you're giving over discovery. Context for purchases at least 6 months prior to what has been provided are critical for drawing opinions. There were none. There is no full disclosure or analysis of click stream history that spans the scope of the multiple warrants and subpoenas. There is no full Amazon advertising history. So, and like, were the other purchases made around the same time that provide context? Other purchases made around the time or that same time can provide context to the items of purchase. In our example, the shopper who also purchased a sleeping bag, a tent, a cook stove, long johns, and a safety vest for an upcoming, hunting trip. Mr. Colbert cannot prepare to confront purported evidence against him that is undisclosed and lacks context. So I played the Steve clip for a reason first, because I do scour the documents. Okay. And what I'm seeing is like, if the state has all of this stuff, why would you ever mess around and not provide that to the defense? Okay. So, and be so organized, because it's been 2.5 years, right? That you don't have all your ducks in a row. The state has produced a select portion of a whole record. The state has cherry-picked information. And then this is where Ashley Jennings says is, no, we did not. Like, that stuff doesn't exist. And I think there's going to be this argument of what came through on federal stuff and then what came through on state stuff. And Judge made it perfectly clear that if the FBI was working as an arm of the Moscow Police Department, who is the lead agency in the case, then yes, they are an arm of, and yes, those are in your possession control, and you need to turn those over to the defense. He cannot determine if the state is asserting a direct search or review of items algorithmically suggested through Amazon's ad system. Testimony must be prohibited pursuant to Criminal, 16. Then next was, and I thought this was interesting. Now, Amazon expert, then they disclose another person by the name of Special Agent Michael Douglas, but he's an FBI accountant. Okay. He is like a forensic auditor. All right. And so I was going to ask Bob, how is he an Amazon expert? Again, the defense just doesn't want these people labeled experts, in my opinion, for the trial. Is that how you feel when you look at the documents? Or, you know, because obviously the weight that's given, first of all, if they didn't disclose a report, like what the hell? Like you didn't meet your deadline. You're not disclosing any of your opinions, because then we have to go out and get our experts after we're handed, hey, this is what this says. You go and get your experts that are going to say, no, that's not what that says. Or, yeah, that's actually what that says. You know, that's how this works. But it doesn't work that way for lay witnesses, for fact witnesses. So, but to be considered an expert, there's expert disclosures that go back and forth. There's deadlines. And so for me, it's interesting that Michael Douglas just gets thrown in the mix, because Michael Douglas here is any opinion testimony must be excluded. All arguments set forth in Shane Cox in paragraph 4 above are incorporated for Michael Douglas as it relates to any testimony about Amazon clicks. How can you write down, Ashley Jennings, that Michael Douglas is going to be testifying to the same thing that Shane Cox is going to be testifying to? Where are these people's reports? They do not have the same. No expert has the same fucking report. That makes no sense. The state intends to use Agent Douglas as an Amazon expert without any explanation other than what a cherry-picked group of records might show. The state has produced some records and reports relating to documents collected by this witness. Not all raw data has been disclosed. No explanation of underlying raw data or how it was analyzed and has been disclosed. Nothing. The state has not produced a summary of an opinion about the purported meaning of such documents. Opinion testimony must be prohibited pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 16. The Idaho State Police lab personnel. Now, this was my question for Bob, because you both were at Delphi. And only wants the person that authored the report to testify to that report. That's it. Like, what a novel idea, right? Why would anybody else testify to my report? Nothing more, nothing less. This is normal, right, Bob? Yes. And he was going to say, I know that he would have said yes to this. So then my question is does Bob remember when we were both in Indiana at the Delphi case? I listened all day to a DNA lab expert tell me and tell the world in that courtroom and the jurors, most importantly, from the Indiana State Police Lab, they said that only one person would ever do the work that was requested per case, because that eliminates cross-contamination. That eliminates all possible BS and people messing with, you know, your shit, or, oh, who did this? And then one person does it. The other thing that she said, also Indiana's lab protocol does not mess with touch DNA as testified to by the lab expert. She said it was not reliable. So in this case, Idaho4, are you aware of how many Idaho State Police lab personnel are to testify in this case? And I wanted Bob to guess. Is it 1, 5, 8, or 13? 13. There's 13 people listed that work for the Idaho State Police Lab. The forensic people, the forensic team. That is a lot. One person did all of the Delphi shit for that case. So S15 through S25, right there. Those are 10 reports, okay? S15 through S25, various Idaho State Lab expert witnesses are anticipated. So that's just 10 there. If you don't, like, Nolan and shit like that. And I was just like blown away. Let me zoom in here. To the extent their opinions are limited to the reports authored by them and based on their own expert evaluation is not the subject of the motion limine. This motion seeks an order preventing testimony outside of their reports. Imagine that. Makes sense to me. Why would anybody be testifying to my report other than me. Testimony through any of these witnesses other than their own opinions stated in the Idaho State Police Forensic Laboratory reports, which I went ahead and started sifting through all this stuff here, which is talking about, these protocols and what you should be doing at a crime scene, and that whole swabbing, and this is what we're gonna be doing in closing, and it's gonna be super interesting to me to see, based on how they're supposed to do things, how then down the road when we find out how they did do things. So all they're saying is, hey, the lab people, they're going to be just testifying to their report, period. Next up is the digital forensic experts disclosed by the state. I couldn't believe this when I saw this. S10, 13, and 14. This is Maori, Tanzola, and Neil Urig. I'm going to zoom in. And the state has provided no disclosure of any expert opinions related to 67 electronic devices and third-party data collected during the investigation. Now, we remember the Murdaugh murders, right? And do you know what they did with the devices? Okay, they had Maggie, Paw, and Alec all on a big old fat timeline, right? Right? Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And, boom, like where people are going, those three based on, different things that are going on with their phones, all that stuff, right? Well, here, to date, when this happened, no reports existed. The state has failed to identify what portions of the electronic device data, digital data, and/or third-party search warrant return data will be presented. The state has failed to disclose any expert opinion about what any analysis of the devices and data depict. The state has disclosed in discovery a new report stating further examination is taking place. What? This is the discovery deadline was in September of 2024. This is absurd. And so this is why I see Steve's frustration. 2 to 2.5 years. And this is, I don't think that the victims should not get evidence in because Ashley Jennings and Bill Thompson didn't do their job. That's just awful. The state has disclosed in discovery a new report stating further examination is taking place. That disclosure came well after the state's discovery deadline. The report does not contain any sort of opinion. Now, one of the things that Ashley Jennings has argued in saying that, well, we just were overcautious and put these people down as experts, okay, but we don't really think that they're experts, but we're just out of caution, we're just going to put them down as experts. Okay, what? So basically, these people are like, in a sense, like police officers. They're going to be testifying, and they're going to now have to testify as like, because your deadline for those type of reports that aren't, if you're not going to offer up any type of an opinion that's an expert opinion, then again, I have no idea, like that's what you would want to be doing. So I have no idea what Ashley Jennings is doing. Unless these phones show a completely different picture than, and we can't talk about that. So therefore, we're not going to be going in depth like that. But it's very, very troubling to see this and wonder, like, I don't understand why you guys don't have reports. And then I could see Ashley Jennings saying, we don't have reports because we're not having them as experts. We just did that out of abundance of caution. Okay, well, I can tell you that's a big blow to the state, though, because jurors, when they hear like an expert testifying and, you know, they're told about experts, and when the defense is going to have these people all labeled as experts, and then the state just has, we're just going to go with our badge type thing. Our badge is our... But you won't be able to ask the question, in your expert opinion, da-da-da-da. You know what I mean? Ashley Jennings won't be able to ask those questions like that. The other thing that was interesting is that repeatedly the state writes that it cannot provide rebuttal as Mr. Colbert has not provided information about what his experts may say. The state's disclosures would seem to be the proverbial chicken and egg antidote, except in criminal proceedings, the accused has rights under the United States Constitution and the Idaho Constitution Court. Proceeding are rules banning and presiding judges pronounce deadlines. And so that's just even more of like Ashley, what do you like? You get us your stuff. We look at what your expert's going to say, and then we're going to have rebuttals to your experts. If we can even find people that would rebut, you know, whatever. So it's just, it's wild. It's wild. It's really wild. The state's disclosures remain vague. Mr. Colbert cannot prepare to confront purported evidence that is undisclosed. The electronic evidence in this case is critical, and the state is impeding the defense from being able to prepare to confront the evidence or use evidence in Mr. Colbert's capital trial. You know, for example, it would be like me producing a report on Jennifer Drake's phone and showing that she, the things that she was doing. Have you guys seen the Monica Simontelli case? Go watch Cy Ray's testimony. He testifies for the state. He's a state prosecution witness, and all maps out everywhere that Monica's going, and when Monica's phone is in the same place in Vegas that, you know, that the guy that, you know, killed her husband. I mean, that's what he testifies to. And he shows a pattern of life over a course of a period of time with these phones, and whose other phones are with, things like that, because they have the data from these multiple phones. Okay. You would think at this point, 2.5 years later, that the state having all of these people, 3 to 6 digital forensic folks, I don't understand. And so these phones are really, really important. And then so I go back and I'm like, I struggle because it's like, how does Steve know all of these things, but the defense doesn't? So if you go and you listen to what Steve said again, he said, trust me, those FBI guys know everything. Like, the phones can do all these things. And it's like, yeah, Steve, you're absolutely right. So why haven't they disclosed all of this stuff so that they could be experts in your daughter's case? So it's interesting. The electronic evidence in this case, again, is critical, and the state is impeding the defendant from being able to prepare to confront evidence or use evidence in Mr. Colbert's capital trial. Testimony must be prohibited pursuant to Idaho rules. It's just... Okay. And then so here's me getting feisty. Remember, this was all my stuff to have for Bob and Allie if I was going to be doing their show. And so here you guys go. I said, what in the actual fuck is going on around here? How in the fuck do you not have any disclosures about where the following phones are located based on their phones on the 11th, on the 12th and 13th, at the bare minimum? The survivors, where they were all, the DoorDashers' phone, the Jack D, Jack S, the neighbors' phones, because they're highly relevant. The victims, Brian. I mean, this is the bare minimum of the people that there would be reports on. Now, you know, from the extractions, Idaho State Police Detective Gilbertson, they list him as a expert. Again, out of abundance of caution, as Jennings says, which then she says, you know, I think that the defense is going to be like, these aren't experts. Like this is one of your lead investigators from Idaho State Police. He's not an expert. Okay. And the defense would be right about that. Detective Gilbertson, the state did not disclose Detective Gilbertson in their initial disclosures, but instead listed him as a rebuttal witness. And it's like, what is he going to rebut? The state did not identify any specific expert or opinion that the detective will rebut. Thus, the court should exclude this testimony as outside the scope of rebuttal and irrelevant. Like Anne has to disclose an expert on her side, and then you then disclose your rebuttal to one of her experts. Moreover, the court should exclude the testimony under 403B. The relevancy of the testimony is minimal at best and carries a serious risk of juror confusion, because guess what? They put down that Detective Gilbertson is going to be testifying about that the detective walked through alone through the house that he is intimately familiar with in the middle of broad daylight more than 1 week after the house had been vacated. And so then therefore it changed significantly due to a homicide investigation. And Detective Gilbertson, he simply counted out loud upon entering rooms. And you want to know what that's for? That was the test to see that this could be done in the amount of time. Then the other thing that was interesting about this is that the defense saw this in some reports, you know, because you have to sign into a crime scene and go out of a crime scene. You have to sign in the time you go in. You have to sign out the time that you leave. And that was a crime scene for a very, very long time. Like many of days was that like an active crime scene. Okay. And so there was a report written up about this. And Anne then says, this is a far cry from what the state alleges occurred. Additionally, Mr. Culber attempted to learn more about this experiment through discovery. He sought things such as recordings or photographs of the timed run or written notes taken and documented during the experiment. Nothing was provided in discovery. Now, that is a big no-no in Idaho State Police world. Okay. So, yeah, that's going to fall under, let's see, documenting. Documentation includes written recordings of observations, photograph of the scene, and the creation of sketches and or diagrams. Documentation should be undertaken from the least intrusive to the most intrusive. So this is when you first get on scene, and then it continues. Documentation doesn't just end. It's like you're always documenting. So there's a ton of talk about documentation. And so Gilbertson, being part of the Idaho State Police, would know all about this in their little handbook here. Physical collection of items in the scene is always an intrusive process. Once an item has been removed or moved, the context of the scene is changed forever. If an item is moved prior to the completion of documentation, significant notes should be made as to the item's original location / orientation and the reason for moving it. An item should not be returned to its original location / orientation to attempt to photograph it. Ideally, an item should not be altered prior to collection. You know, if your jeans are inside out, you're going to leave them that way. Some items, though, such as firearms, may be altered prior to collection for specific reasons such as safety. If an item's condition is inadvertently altered during collection, it should be noted. Documentation is a continuous process. Epic fail. So it's interesting that during discovery, nothing was turned over when asked about this. Okay. And then here we get to this expert disclosures, and she puts him down for rebuttal because I guess they're thinking they're going to try to argue that this couldn't have been done in the time frame that we're alluding. So we're going to have a rebuttal to that, and that's going to be Detective Idaho State Police Detective Gilbertson, and we're going to talk about his timed. There's no report, no documentation, no nothing. Okay. Yeah, right. Like, Ann Taylor is preparing for the trial of the century, and the state has been preparing the whole time to get a plea deal from day one. And it breaks my heart that Steve has been lied to by people that he trusted. It's obvious. Again, nothing was provided in discovery. The prosecution stated those items did not exist. Oh my God. Do you understand that? That these items did not exist. Well, you guys, then hey, Ann Taylor, if you go to observations and notes under 8.0, observations and notes, it says it right here that documentation is a continuous process, okay? Documentation of observations in the scene requires significant effort. Overall observations are best documented via handwritten and/or electronic notes. The scene should be documented in such a way that it preserves the context of the evidence to ensure others can later understand not just what was collected, but also where, how, and in what condition it was found. Documentation is a continuous process. If you're going to go into that crime scene and you're going to do anything with it, okay, you're documenting, you're recording, you're taking photographs, you're using digital, the cameras that they have. Investigative notes are a staple of any crime scene investigation. And a crime scene investigation does include any type of a reenactment at the crime scene. Notes should begin with notification of the crime, identified involved personnel. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So to sit here and say that you went into the crime scene and that you did all this and that nothing exists as far as documentation, I mean, that is a huge, that's not protocol. And so I start getting Karen Reed vibes. Nothing was provided in discovery. The prosecution said that items did not exist. Finally, the court should exclude this testimony because it violates Mr. Culber's due process rights. The house has been torn down. The defense can not now effectively rebut the inflammatory and minimally relevant testimony. Okay. And it's going to be out. How did you not document any of this? So Ann Taylor better be arguing that this is none of that's it's right there. Inconclusive data motion limit number 5. Again, this has to do with the fingernails. Oh, wait, I want to back up. I wanted to ask Bob about this. Gary Dawson, this expert was disclosed for the first time in the state's rebuttal experts. He is a toxicology expert. Mr. Colbert did not disclose an expert relating to toxicology. This expert is not a rebuttal expert and should be excluded from trial. Why wouldn't Gary Dawson be put down actually as an expert for the state to show that, because I know what they're going to try to go with, and I would do it too. We want to show Maddie May and her toxicology was just off the chain, and that she didn't even, there's no defensive wounds. She didn't. And so anything that would be underneath her fingernails, that was stuff from, earlier that night, that previous day. Okay. Like, so why would the state make such a blunder as to not list Gary Dawson as unless they have somebody else for that? But then what is he a rebuttal to, because the defense didn't disclose anybody? And if you don't disclose anybody, then you have no idea what you're rebutting, because you don't know what the expert on the other side is saying. I mean, this is just very bizarre. Okay. So everybody wants to talk about, let's see, Dylan's bushy eyebrows. So I'm going to go to the chat here. Dylan's bushy eyebrows. What I wanted to ask Bob is Dylan's bushy eyebrows. What is this motion's true purpose? And then what are the legs to say, and did they have any grounds here that Dylan doesn't mention anything to first interviewer Noonan's about bushy eyebrows? And that interview took place at 12:07 p.m. So then Dylan's second interview, which did not follow Idaho State policy procedure, Moscow Police Department policy and procedure. All of these people were together that were witnesses, neighbors, all hanging out. And before she had her second interview, where then she goes down to the police department, and in Dylan's second interview, after being with others and not separated, Mowry brings Dylan into the police station and asks about the intruder's eyebrows. Is this suggestive, as he was the first to mention eyebrows? Basically, I wanted to ask Bob, based on the motion, do you see that this was actually for another reason? Then I wanted to point out to Bob, are you aware that is it a way to bring up that, I wanted to find out where truthfulness falls in. Should the training and experience of these officers, or can you argue this, the training and experience of these officers, when they would have realized that Dylan did not go to bed between 3 and 3:20, like she stated, does that then negate all of this? And when do you think that they would have actually had the extraction download from Dylan's phone and Bethany's phone to, that's a quick look. If you're starting right with that day and that night and seeing what's going on the phone. So I wanted to ask him about that. Wait, you're still doing this on Bob's channel, just not today, right? Yes, I'm giving him an opportunity to see some of my hand. I think these are all questions that you guys would have, though, to get answered as far as how you would go about that. And then Rachel Smith says, but the toxicology report is irrelevant. I know, that was just so bad of a thing to say. So now the pictures on November 13th, law enforcement took pictures of DM's room on November 13th and November 19th. There's a little nugget for us right there. November 19th. Okay. What were they doing back over there on November 19th, 2022? You guys could be jurors out there. If you guys heard that Dylan writes and draws pictures of people with prominent eyes and eyebrows, as a juror, does that matter? I would just think that drinking and all of this stuff, I guess my thing is that is the argument that basically nothing that she has to say is that she shouldn't be able to say it because it's not reliable. That's my thing. Does that make sense? So what I was going to ask Bob is, how would one argue that? You just come out and say, you're not going to just come out and say, we think Dylan's a liar. No, you're going to say, based on the situation, based on the circumstances, based on everything that she said, everything that she claimed that she was doing, all the drinking, right? She's saying that she went to bed, but then here we find out that she's saving contacts in her phone. It just, none of this is reliable. Tina says, not reliable after drinking a Borg. Suggested. Yes, true. Sherry DiPola Gallagher, I agree. DM is all over the place with her statements. Yes. Well, Dylan told investigators that she was sleeping at and woke at 4 a.m. They downloaded and extracted the phone of DM on 11/13/2022, one can assume, right? So they would have known the phone's actions if they would have looked at the extraction, right? So my question for Bob was then, when do you think they would have found out that the defense expert, or I'm sorry, if the defense expert was able to go through and boom, here, this contact saved, this is just right there. This stuff gets relayed from their experts, meaning the state during the investigation, like the police, because you have all these hands on deck, right? And so can one truly believe that you wouldn't have brought the attention to the investigators to say, hey, this girl was saving a contact on her phone at 3:51. What time did she say she went to bed? And she said she felt like she was out of it and she woke up out of the blue she's up at 3:51. Is this an argument to say for Dylan's statements being unreliable because she wasn't being truthful about sleeping? So should we let the jury hear her bushy eyebrows? Should we let her saying anything about what she saw? If that's the case, or is Judge Hipper going to say, hey, this is all for cross-examination? she's going to take the stand, and you're going to point out that, and whether you want to do it through Dylan or whether you want to do it through the detectives and say, you guys, she said that she saw a firefighter. Okay. Did you guys start looking into firefighters? You know, a 19 to 20-year-old female would have left the house if they thought that there was an intruder, right? I mean, you know how many people I asked this to? If you thought, especially if somebody just had passed you, it's one thing if you thought you heard something. Like, that's why I was like, I think Steve's comparing oranges to apples here. Okay, seeing a masked man in your home is not like you think that you heard something like at your car, or you thought. That is comparing oranges to apples. And I think the jury's going to agree. You saw a masked man in your house 3 feet away from you. So a 19 to 20-year-old female would have left the house if they thought an intruder was in their home. And when I say thought, I mean she seen a masked man at between 4 and 4:20 a.m., right? Now, what about the dog barking for 30 minutes straight from 4:17 a.m. until 4:37 a.m., a little bit even further from that? How can anyone sleep with a dog barking nonstop? The girls would have known that what Murphy's bark sounds like, right? So was it even Murphy's that was doing the barking? I mean, these are all questions that you would poke at for, I think, detectives to say, or to ask them, why didn't you leave the house if you saw a masked man? And so can you argue to the judge that this is not logical? And the judge will be like, no, you're going to have to show that Dylan didn't see anything. We don't even know. Do we even know if Dylan was on the second floor? And then the blood is between the first floor and the second floor, not the second and the third. So if the killer never went on the first floor where Bethany's room is, then how is there blood on the banister between 1 and 2? I mean, so again, I have strong feelings. It's one thing if I thought I heard something in my house versus me seeing a man with a mask on. And that's where, again, she was shown the picture of the mask, and that's the mask that she drew. How about this? She indicated that she watched Criminal Minds and fell asleep to crime podcasts. I thought this was interesting too, that she asked her about her dreams and anxiety, and Dylan talking about that she has dreams of being kidnapped and chased. Those dreams suck. Like, those are dreams, those are nightmares. But then way before Brian's name comes up on December 1st, 2022, Dylan was interviewed again, and she states that she saw a fireman. Throughout the interview, DM indicated that she had always had really bad dreams, lucid dreams, and scary dreams. She did not know what parts of her recollections were dreams and what parts were real. Well, but that's the thing, is that's where I think that this even gets more into a lie, you guys, because I don't think that she had dreams between 3:51, okay, and 4 a.m. What is she talking about? She never went to sleep yet. This to me is more of like somebody like tripping. So I think for me, for the argument for Ann Taylor would be against Ashley Jennings is you guys are assuming based off your police work that she went to bed, which I don't know where you're getting that out of everything that she said. Oh, because she said she went to sleep. Yeah, but then you get the extraction and you know that she's awake at 3:51 putting a new contact in her phone. So wouldn't you sit her down and say, hey, we have your extraction here. Dylan, what were you doing at 3:50? Whose number were you saving in your phone? Who was with you? You're going to sit here and tell me that that didn't come up? And I'm going to tell you that it didn't. My gut tells me that it didn't based on the way that they interviewed Jennifer Drake. They knew things that Jennifer was lying about and didn't say shit to her. And then so here, you know, in the same interview on December 1st, when she woke up that morning, well, what part? She did not fully understand what was a dream or not. In this interview, she indicated that she thought that the person she saw was a fireman. Well, that's interesting because right there, a fireman wears all of the that mask. So here I will share. Let's see. What up? Okay, yeah. Did I share this? Oopsies. There you go. Oh, shit. Here you guys go. This is courtesy of official. Okay. Here we go. It's more for a, you know, I think it was like a fireman. Pretty interesting. I mean, that's how close, like, wouldn't you say that's 3 feet away? I just, my thing would be, like, I don't know who would still, I don't think that she'd be alive if she was 3 feet away from the killer. Like, that's probably like 3 feet, right? So I think that I don't know. I just think that that's 3 feet. Some of the frat guys are also volunteer firefighters. Yeah, they have a firefighter program. Mark says it looks like it's 4 feet, Lana. Come on. So it's I just would think that, you know, if you're truly gonna say that he only went in there to kill one person and ends up killing 4, okay, but gets 3 feet to close to Dylan and doesn't kill her. You know, and then I don't know if you guys went and check out that show Caught. It's a Netflix it's like, I don't know, 6:45 minutes. It's like a little I don't know, murder mystery, whatever. And one of the girls in that, well, they had one of the girls put on, they did a lineup with 6 people, and they had these dudes put on these masks, and she was like, she could pick them out. But then again, though, she was sexually assaulted. Anyways, motion limine to exclude IGG. So if you didn't join me last night or yesterday when I made some phone calls, this was my closure with the IGG for Bob, which is that the state now, so where we're at here is that the state and the defense, well, because the defense puts in like, hey, they want to exclude all the IGG and everything from it. Okay. And the state's over here like, wait, what? Wait, we want to exclude it all too, but we want to have a tip from it. Okay. And so this is my way to explain it to people why Ann Taylor did that. Because without IGG, you're not going to be able to mention the sheath, because you're not going to be able to lie to the jury on how you got to Brian Koberger without IGG, because Ann Taylor got the testimony a bunch of different ways during a hearing. So the state says, when they filed their motion in limine, said that these are the facts, is that in June of 2023, the state moved for an order protecting the information related to the use of IGG in this case, including the raw data related to the SNP profile and the underlining laboratory documentation related to the development of the profile, such as chain of custody forms, laboratory standard operating procedures, all of this shit, right? This is the first time that we ever heard in June of 2023 that in this case, they come out on the record and they say, yep, how we got Brian's name was IGG. The state argued the IGG information did not fall within Rule 16 of the Idaho criminal rules because it was used only as a tip, and that the state, quote unquote, has no plans to present the IGG information for which a protective order is sought as evidence at trial, other than having an investigator testify only that they received a tip pointing law enforcement to defendant. You know, they wrote this up back in June of 2023. Okay. And so if you don't think that Ann and her team didn't read the documents back in 2023, okay, they most certainly did. So the state then said, the state suggested that the court review the IGG information in camera to determine what, if any, of the IGG information should be disclosed to the defense. The court found, meaning Judge found, that the state's argument that the IGG investigation is wholly irrelevant since it was not used in obtaining any warrants and will not be used at trial is well supported. Okay, Judge, the state's argument that the IGG investigation is wholly irrelevant since it was not used in obtaining any warrants and will not be used at trial is well supported. And this is in his order where he was addressing all this shit. But the court also determined that the defense may be entitled to some of the IGG information. Accordingly, the court granted the state's request in camera review. So then Judge does looking at it all over and makes a ruling on here. You can have all of this shit. The state, though, does not put in the SOPs, but acts like it did. It's a mess. So anyways, the defense later moved to suppress all evidence collected as a result of IGG on the basis that the IGG process violated defendants' rights under the Fourth Amendment. So that's what we had in January. At the January 23rd, 2025 hearing on the motion to suppress, ISP Lab Director Matthew Gamet testified that ISP had received Othram's standard operating procedures in the context of the bidding process and used by ISP to secure a private lab to perform work related to IGG. Shortly after the hearing, the defense sent additional discovery requests to the state related to the IGG information, including a request for Othram's protocols and procedures as testified to Matthew Gamet, because remember, Bill said that this shit didn't exist. The state put together a response objecting to each of the IGG requests for the same or similar reasons it had objected to the previous IGG-related discovery requests back in the day. The IGG's discovery had already been handled through the process established by the court's in-camera order. However, in putting together its response, the state learned that Othram had provided its standard operating procedures to Idaho State Police, but ISP had not provided them to the Latah County Prosecutor's Office for it to be disclosed to the court in response to the court's December 29th, 2023, because of the in-camera review and what he said that the defense gets. The in-camera order specifically, okay? So specifically then on February 9th, 2025, just recently, the state first recognized that the form Othram filled out during the bidding process asked the bidder to submit written standard operating procedures. And Othram's response indicated that Othram uploaded its standard operating procedure as the file SOP zip. And that was in this in-camera materials, ISP Othram contract documents. The state compared Othram's response to the information provided to the court in response for the in-camera order and found the state did not provide the SOP zip. They did not put it in there. Upon further review of its record, the state found that the Idaho State Police had not provided the file SOP zip to the Latah County Prosecutor's Office that they've had this whole time. Okay. The state then confirmed with Idaho State Police that Othram had provided the standard operating procedures to Idaho State Police, but that they were inadvertently not provided to the Latah County Prosecutor's Office. It's like, wait, what? Do you know how many times the defense asked for this? And they needed it. They needed it for, because it would show everything that they do in the case when they're handed over something to be subcontracted like they were for the Idaho State Police Lab. And the Idaho State Police, just, I mean, in general. So here, just 2 days after learning this information, just here in February, the state provided to the defense and filed with the court its response to the defense's discovery request. The state explained in its response that the bidding documents included for the court's in-camera review revealed the existence of Othram's standard operating procedures, but the state had inadvertently failed to disclose the standard operating procedures themselves. The state also explained that the standard operating procedures were covered by the court's protective order because the court had not required the disclosure of any of the bidding documents other than the MOU, including the documents that revealed the existence of the standard operating procedure. On that basis, that the remaining contract documents are not relevant to any issue in the case. It is undisputed that IGG is simply, this is the state writing, it is undisputed that IGG is simply a means to generate potential leads as to who DNA found at a crime scene may belong to. If one of those leads proves fruitful, law enforcement can conduct a confirmatory test as to whether the DNA belongs to the suspect using STR comparison. Everything that became fruitful was from search warrants that did what with the car and the path of travel and remember they got the phone records from Brian through Duke's. He put the phone number on there. So all of this stuff building up these warrants when you're talking about fruitful stuff. In order to ever get that comparison STR, okay, Ashley Jennings and the detectives, everybody that was co-located, had to bury the first 7 minutes of Brian's AT&T records, the timing advanced records. That's how you get that confirmatory test, by being able to obtain his DNA. And so what I could never imagine here is that you're telling me that you couldn't lift his DNA, okay? And they don't get that confirmatory DNA until after he's arrested, okay? So the defenses or the state's saying that the strength of the evidence against a defendant in terms of DNA evidence depends upon the confirmatory result from the STR DNA analysis between the defendant's DNA and the DNA recovered from the crime scene. Again, I took out the big major parts. The state says the defense has not disclosed any experts to challenge the confirmatory STR comparison showing the DNA on the knife sheath matched the defendant's DNA. On the contrary, the defense has disclosed that its forensic biology and DNA expert will testify that, in quotes, there is a good support that Mr. Kohlberger's DNA was found on item 1.1, a swab from the knife sheath, end quote. Instead of challenging the conclusion that the DNA on the knife sheath belonged to defendant, the defense expert disclosures reveal that the defense plans to argue the DNA on the knife sheath does not prove defendant was ever at the crime scene, and the knife sheath itself could have been planted by the real perpetrator. State says, the IGG was conducted as a preliminary assessment of potential owners of the DNA found on the knife sheath and identified defendant as a potential owner of the DNA. So here is where the state admits that IGG was used in connection with the sheath, and that it brought back a potential owner of the DNA, being Brian Kohlberger. But it was the scientific process of the STR comparison that confirmed defendant's DNA matched the DNA found on the knife sheath. Now, the state has no plans to use the preliminary assessment of the IGG at trial, and the defense has no plans to challenge the confirmatory STR comparison. Thus, the preliminary assessment of the IGG could have no effect on the result of the trial. The defense has not and cannot, I'm talking about Brady. Even if Othram failed to follow every standard operating procedure, that does not change the fact that the IGG merely pointed law enforcement toward defendant as a potential owner of the DNA on the knife sheath, or that the unchallenged confirmatory STR comparison showed that the DNA on the knife sheath matched defendant. So they're saying it every which way possible. This is what I was going to be explaining to Bob, to say that nothing in that probable cause came first that was written about Brian Kober. Nothing. Furthermore, even if the defense's speculations were correct, it would not have changed the outcome of the court's decision. And this was the court order from the suppression genetic and from that hearing from and when Hitler put that order in at 2 on February 19, 2025, when he says, moreover, even assuming there were sensitive genetic details revealed by the IgG performed here, the fact that the DNA was obtained from a crime scene and analyzed for purposes of identifying the perpetrator displaces any reasonable expectation of privacy. Because my argument is, when are they going to realize that Ann Taylor is no longer arguing anything that has to do with privacy? Okay. Ann Taylor needs you guys to all write in documents and testify under oath that you didn't have anything that has anything to do with Brian Kober until when? The IgG. There's nothing else. You had no piece of evidence. You had nothing linking. We need that to be set on every cylinder. Okay? Because normally one would put that in the probable cause because that's how you're establishing true probable cause. Okay? You know, if this all was legit and they did things on the up and up, and they do it all the time now. We research a lot of cases that have, they reference the IgG actually in the probable cause. The defense has not proven any of the elements necessary to show a Brady violation, and the court should deny the defense's motion because they're talking about a Brady violation because they didn't disclose the SOPs. And but here the argument is that actually what we were going to be able to show is that based on the SOPs, depending on what the Idaho State Lab or the police would be able to get back from Othram, like based on, hey, when you're doing all this stuff, what do you send to them? What could have been in the hands? Did it have anything to do with medical, like if your health information? If this raw data got into the hands of and back to the police, like that's why you need to know the operating standard procedures with the lab of Othram to be able to argue your point that no, they did have stuff to do with the medical history. Okay, but they didn't turn that over. Anyways, as the state has explained, as far back as the beginning of the litigation over the IgG, as recently as its competing motion in limine filed contemporaneously with the defense's motion, the state does not intend to introduce the IgG information at trial, other than to help the jury understand how the investigation progressed, aka how you got to Brian Kober. The state can do so by referring to the IgG information as just a generic tip without revealing the source of the substance of the tip. An investigator can simply testify that law enforcement received a tip and that based on the information received, law enforcement took the next step in the investigation. This is truly what the state wrote. And then so I was going to then tell Bob, Okay, Bob. So explain to me how this isn't TKO. Under oath, Ann Taylor. Okay. Officer Payne, as such, did you participate in a search for a suspect? Yes, ma'am. And when was the first time you heard Brian Kohlberger's name? The first time I heard Brian Kohlberger's name was December 19th, 2022. And what was that a result of? That was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening and we were told Brian Kohlberger's name. And before that, Mr. Kohlberger was not on your radar. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Okay. So this is where I believe Ann Taylor has set it up that so I was going to say, okay, so Bob, so tell me how you're able to talk about Brian Kohlberger's DNA being found on the knife sheath in court. And I'll ask the ladies and gentlemen in the chat. So how is the state, Ashley Jennings, going to present her case in chief? Like, you call people to the stand and you say, okay, so Detective Payne, well, she'd probably have the first responders on that went to the house, and they said, they say whatever, and they did interviews with, the surviving roommates, and then you're going to have people that come on and that talk about that they processed the scene and that they found that there was a knife sheath there, and that they ran. Well, Payne is going to talk about how he put into CODIS the profile, or that they only put in one profile into CODIS, and it was the profile that came off of the knife sheath, and that they didn't. He's saying that they couldn't upload any more than just one profile. That's not true. But you had blood evidence at the scene that's unknown males, and you didn't upload any of that blood evidence that you had, like the profiles for. No, we were only interested in obtaining the person's DNA that was on the sheath. Oh, well, how did you do that? Well, we got a tip. What do you mean you got a tip? When you uploaded into CODIS, did you get a hit? So you uploaded into CODIS. Yes. And so was there any hits off of the sheath being uploaded? No, there was not. Now, so you get to the point of that in the case. How, with the motion limine, and you cannot reference the IGG at all, how are you going to be able to say that you got to Brian Kohlberger? How are you going to even be able to say that you got the name to be able to then do everything that then you put in your probable cause affidavit? And that's the thing, is you can't just say the tip. You can't say anything else, because Ann Taylor not only just did this, but if you read the 30 pages of when she was questioning the lead detective and he was co-located with everybody and he was working in concession with the prosecutors, what item did you link Brian Koberger? What evidence item did you think was Brian Koberger's? The sheath. What does the state say? The sheath. So you get to the point, how does the state present their case? There is no case. They will get caught up in their lies if this goes to trial. Exactly. And they've already gotten caught up in their lies. And I don't understand why nobody's seeing this. I shouldn't say nobody. All of you guys here at Truth and Transparency are. Everybody maybe is avoiding this. Okay? Because all along in June of 2023, as the state has said, we planned all along to do this. And if you had shitty ass attorneys that didn't realize what they meant by all of this shit, first of all, they said, where is it? Right here. In 2023, remember, in 2023, you don't even have Brian's name. You don't get Brian's name. Nobody gets Brian's name. It's not turned over. His name cannot possibly be turned over. You're not allowed to give this generic tip to lie to the jury on how you got to him. It's one thing when you have a suppression hearing because you can suppress things. You don't have hearings where you get to add evidence in. You don't get to have hearings where we get to make up shit on how we got to Brian Koberger. And that's where Ann Taylor's response to this write-up was, all right, looks like we all agree that the IGG is out. And we welcome the argument of how you were going to possibly tell the jury that you got to Brian Koberger a way that you didn't get to Brian Koberger. Like, if you think that we're letting that happen, you're out of your mind. Like, that's literally what they wrote, that they were going to not reveal the substance or the source, and that they're going to sanitize this in a way just to say that they developed an investigative lead. My ass. Okay. But right here, see, the state argued the IGG information did not fall within because we have no plans to present the IGG information for which a protective order is sought as evidence at trial, other than having an investigator testify, in quotes, only that they received a tip pointing law enforcement to defendant. Well, that's not happening. You can say that, but you're going to have to say investigative genetic genealogy. So my question is how do you even reference the sheath then? You're going to reference the sheath to say that you put it into CODIS and that you got no hits. You can't say how you then went and did IGG with the sheath. Does everybody understand that? What the court and the jury is going to hear, you guys, is that there's a sheath that was uploaded to CODIS and it had no hits. Okay? Then you're going to have to say how you miraculously decided to, and this is where they're going to get caught. You're going to train people, as in right now, working with them, questioning them, because this is how we're going to have to present this case to this jury. And it's going to be that we were looking into all these, WSU and Idaho campus cars, and we started to eliminate, where are any of these police reports? None of this is in discovery. None of this stuff is in discovery. None of these police reports exist that you guys were doing any of this. Like, none of this can go on. So you upload the profile that from the sheath into CODIS, no hits, correct? Okay. So then what did you do? we received a tip. To do what? We received a tip. There's going to be objections left and right. You guys, this is bad. They don't want to use IG because it points to other people. No. No, that's not, no. They can't. They don't want to use IgG because then they're going to have to reveal, okay, actual dates of stuff. They're going to have to reveal that they use databases that they weren't supposed to, okay? And they're going to be talking about violating policies and doing all of this stuff, which makes somebody not credible. When you're up on the stand and then you talk about, okay, so it was you can't talk about the sheath. It's a piece of evidence. So what did you do with the raw data from the sheath that you uploaded to CODIS? Did you do anything else with it? And then do you think Payne's going to say on the stand, no? So let's say that Payne says, yeah, he got this lead, blah, blah, blah. He got this investigative tips from somebody to investigate Brian Kober. And they try to make up some other, like, well, Detective Payne, didn't you testify before we had and you testified that that you uploaded, that you did not know about Brian Kober's name until December 19th. Okay. So how did you, so on cross, so detective, isn't it true that you know how you found out about Brian Kober's name? Like, but this is where the motion limine comes in. This is why I think that the sheath is out of play, because the sheath is and this is what I wanted to like talk to Bob about, to say how she's connected the IgG to the sheath. It's not like it's an unknown item that IgG came from. IgG came from using the sheath. So the sheath, thank you so much, Lindsay May. So the sheath is connected to the IgG. So how are you going to be able to say that Brian Kober's DNA was on the sheath without mentioning, because did you test Brian Kober's DNA against the blood? Well, no. Well, why didn't you test Brian Kober's DNA against the blood? That profile. Well, why didn't you put that profile into CODIS? You had blood on the handrail. Did you put that into CODIS? No. Did you put the handrail? No. The gloves? No. What were you guys doing from November 13th to December 19th? You're not going to be able to lie to the jury. Officer Payne cannot get up on the stand and say that he got a tip from somebody that he didn't get a tip from. Capiche? That's perjury. Ann Taylor nailed him down. He's the lead investigator. That's why she had him testify at that last hearing. So I'm just curious how Ashley Jennings, and I wanted to hear from a defense attorney, I hear from a prosecutor. I don't give a shit. I want someone to tell me how they are going to explain this, because this is how, this is your argument if you're Ann Taylor. Well, Hitler, you said that they had probable cause and that they did it all this way and that they didn't need the IgG, right? Because they developed probable cause, and you said they partially identified Brian because of some license plate that didn't exist on some car that was white, and because of the WSU queries, right? Those are how you partially identified him. And that the DNA was just a bonus. Okay, well, you do know that these police reports don't exist. And so I go back to this question, which is, why the hell? And I already know the answer. It's money. Ashley Jennings, Bill Jennings, she has all of the FBI and all these people, Idaho State Police, they've all done a murder before, okay? And that they're talking to people that have done IGG before and how it's worked in previous cases. So why would Ashley Jennings think and Bill Jennings think that they could prosecute this case without saying that they started this entire case off of investigative genealogy? They needed that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But how would you think that you can go prosecute this case without truly saying that that's how this all started? Well, because we lied in the PCA, and because we all just figured that we would be able to get him to settle. This was never going to go to trial. And then how can anybody be so confident that Brian Koberger would be the guy if these are the type of moves that were being made in the investigation and during the stages to figure out a way to lie? We have to figure out a way to lie? Because the state tells us in June, well, first of all, they tell us off the rip when they don't put the IGG in the probable cause, they have no intention of using it, right? And it's because they feel like they can't use it because they know things that we don't know, right? And so if you got to do all of this, and then you fudge the timing advance, like you make it seem like this phone and car are moving in sequence when they're not. And you did all of that before you ever got his DNA to test it, right? Yeah, you're right. Because we put in, we were doing, these search warrants before we got, well, we went and got his parents' trash. Like nothing was done by protocol on how you even do the IGG. You go and you get the guy's DNA that you think that it is. You don't go and grab a bag of trash where you don't know who's depositing what. So I don't. So that's my spiel, is that I believe that Ann Taylor has taken the sheath out. I think that there's no way that they can talk about the sheath and then it belongs to Brian Koberger because they can't talk about IGG. They're just going to be able to talk about the fact that they uploaded profiles into CODIS and they didn't get a hit. Because Ann Taylor made it perfectly clear through Bicca Barlow that we welcome the argument on how you think that you're going to sanitize for the jury and what you think you're going to tell them on how you got to Brian Koberger. You're not going to lie to the jury. So, and that's what you would be doing if you don't mention the investigative genetic genealogy. You would be, in a sense, lying, right? And so that's why they're saying, well, here, go ahead. Just you have your probable cause affidavit. This is how you told. This is where Ann Taylor and her argument's going to be like, Your Honor, this is how they got probable cause because this is how they said that they got to the killer, the defendant, and they didn't even need to use. So I'm sure that they can tell this to the jury. Okay. Right? They can explain this probable cause basically, and they can tell that to the jury. That's how they got to Brian Koberger. And we'll see how that plays out. And there's no mentioning the IGG at all. There's no family tree. There is nothing. And what that means is that you cannot mention that there was any DNA that links Brian Koberger to the case. Period. You understand? Well, wait a second, Lana. How do you figure? Well, because how are you going to figure that you matched his DNA? How did you match it? You matched it through IGG, that process first. And if you can't mention that, you think that you can just mention a sheath that had DNA on it and how you were able to even go get something to this name up out of the blue to go take trash from Pennsylvania to compare it? What? Well, yeah, because because you guys, it just matches. Guys, it just matches. It matched what? The DNA on the knife sheath. Well, how did you know that? Because we got a tip. A tip from who? A tip from the FBI. Because how did the FBI know Brian Koberger's name? Because they did IGG. Because they performed investigative genetic genealogy. Huh. I think that you're going to be able to do your whole case, and I just think that you're not going to be able to link him to after we got his DNA and we put it into CODIS, we had a hit. Because it matched DNA that was at the crime scene. And where'd you get this? So you just, again, who's Brian Koberger? Where does he come into play? Oh, we just got a tip. We got a lead. You got a lead. Just what? I don't know. You can't lie to the jury. That's what Ann Taylor's saying. Is that we all know how you guys got to it. Now you want to suppress it. Okay, so if we suppress it and it's not in and nobody can talk about the IGG, that involves the family tree. The family tree is what led to Brian Koberger doing this family tree. The family tree's out. You can't talk about the family tree. You can't talk about SNP. You can't talk about Dick, nothing. So you entered at the crime scene. You chose to upload only the profile from the sheath. Yeah, and we didn't upload the blood. Okay. And what happened when you did that? We got no hits. And so Brian Koberger wasn't arrested for another crime between November 13th and December 19th, right? Where his, you guys got this hit because he entered the CODIS system somehow? No, Brian, he didn't enter the CODIS system. Okay, so you have no hits. So I'm just trying to talk it out and how anybody would, I want you to tell me how this would work. I feel like I'm on a Lana loop. You should be. This is me just talking it out to say, okay, well, someone come up here and tell me how this would, like, there's no line to the jury. So how do you do it? And I think Ann Taylor's going to say, use your probable cause affidavit. Lady. Stacey's like, I've been in like 6 live chats today. I'm exhausted. I've just heard yet anybody to talk about like this argument. Yeah, thanks. Because then I go to Ashley Jennings' next motion in limine, which is she wants to keep out the timing advance. They don't want to talk about the DOJ. They don't want to talk about databases that were, you know, they don't want to talk about discovery that wasn't turned over. They don't want to talk about any of this shit in a trial. They think that they can just exclude evidence that they have, but we don't. We want to put motion in limine on evidence that we actually have in our possession that we never turned over to the defense. I just mind blowing. And I think that it's truly unfortunate that Hippler didn't give them a Franks, because I think he thought he was doing them a favor, but really where we're at right now is that it's really, really bad. What I want to know is how and why did a tip for BK come up with FBI? Why him? How him? Well, IGG. They did investigative genetic genealogy, and they violated their own policy, and they used all the databases that they weren't supposed to. And so, you know, I mean, that's a given. But what I don't understand is why they didn't just say that they did that from jump. And then I already have the answer for it, so I'll give it to you guys. This is why, y'all. Ready? Because the FBI did the IGG, okay? And when it comes out, if they were to go this route, the state knew that they were lying. They were going to be lying in this probable cause affidavit that had like the, what do you call it? The car and the phone moving together when it didn't, and burying his phone records and all that stuff. So you think that how's it going to plan out for the jury when the jury hears that the feds violated their own policy, went against the DOJ, did all these things, put it in databases that they weren't supposed to, okay? But while that's happening, they have other suspects. Brian Kohlberger is nowhere on the radar. And then even when they get his name, then there's still like there's still X's that are happening. And so they get to the whole phone records part, and they're like, no, fuck this. We'll just bury the 7 minutes, okay, from the 247 until the 254. And if we don't map that and we just make it seem like he went off a little earlier, it puts his car like this. We'll put him on that one. And then, are you kidding me? But that's what they did. So here, now if it goes to trial, you're going to have the FBI and the state and the jury hearing. So are you going to even believe the evidence then? Then you're not even going to believe that this touched DNA. You're going to believe that it's planted. At least I would believe. If you have to do all of this, you want me to believe that nothing connects this kid except for that, and you want me to not think that that's a planted sheath, or that something's fucked up here that was contaminated? I have no idea. Or that he may have touched at some point. No fucking clue. But all of this shit going on, and I'm supposed to be a juror and say when none of these avenues are panning out and there's no fruits coming back, but except for, okay, the state's going to say, but guys, he bought a mask in January and he bought a K-bar in March of 2022. Okay. And the defense is going to say, he's a runner. He goes camping. He goes hiking. He does, and they're going to have an expert that's showing his patterns of life. Okay. Yeah, that's what these are the only fucking masks they sell anymore. Okay. Makes sense. They found masks in the returns of the houses. They found masks. So it's not like they didn't find any masks at his house. So I could see if he only bought one mask and there's no mask to find. I mean, I don't even know, but then we talk about the damn car. I mean, I don't know. I just think that the DNA being there on the knife sheath, it has the state has to explain that, right? The state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I'm walking into this case without even hearing mainstream media and all the bullshit that's been going on, and I have to listen in a courtroom without all of this stuff that's been going on for 2.5 years, okay, I'm going to give a lot of weight to that, to the DNA, until everything else comes out, until everything else starts chopping it away, aka fudging the data, breaking the policy. I mean, and then being reminded that it's touch DNA. You know, being shown how much blood is all over, stabbing 4 people, never cut himself. Then I find out that the surviving roommates didn't call 911 for 9 hours. They were up. They lied about when they went to sleep. They're calling people. They're texting. They're Snapchatting. They're calling their parents. And then I find out that they all have knives and mask obsessions, and they play these games and pranks on each other and everybody. I mean, you want to hear all of this, and that's what everything's going to be heard. And if I'm the state, I'm trying to cut a deal because I don't think it looks good. And I don't think that Brian Kober will ever take a deal because he's not once wavered in any of his shit. And all these fruitful returns of these warrants aren't returning anything. But again, they're holding stuff back, so we'll see what's coming out at trial. But right now, I don't like what I see about honesty. I don't like what I see about Ashley Jennings straight up lying. Like, you think jurors are going to be happy when you hear that this person, you know, Ashley Jennings doesn't come off as a smooth operator. No, she comes off as gaslighting and condescending about her faulty shit. And if you're going to be able to show me on a map that Brian Kober's car at 254 is a good old 7 miles away from where they say it is, the opposite direction, after all that shit, it's 100% not guilty for me. Based off of reasonable doubt. Like, I don't know. And then if Ann Taylor does a really good job to show that the white car can't possibly be at 401, the car that they were tracking and saying came from WSU, because a car just doesn't start at, Ridge. It comes from somewhere. And if you're going to sit and try to tell the jury that it comes from Walenta, and now I know for a fact you can't make that in 3 minutes because you cannot go the Walenta way. You have to go out and get out there on 95 to come around to be down on Taylor, to be able to be facing, because there's those medians and shit. And you would have been seen on the Ridge Road camera before facing the other way to then be, before you're then facing the other. It's just, it's no way. Also, when you hear the FBI agents say that it's a 2011, 2013, and that they're trying to squeeze in him having a white car that's 2015. Ugh. So everything about this case is circumstantial, right? But when does it become not circumstantial? And I think phone data for me would be, again, this is just me, because every time I go to type in on my phone in Google Maps and I put in an address, I've never once had my GPS run me into damn trees. I've never once had my GPS run me into going the wrong way on the highway. So if I'm able to be shown, just like they did in the Murdoch murder case, of like people's patterns and whereabouts and stuff like that, and to have to hear that an FBI agent knew that there was all this other data and didn't map it because it didn't go with the case. I mean, right there, that's a railroad. You are making evidence. You're trying to bolster your case by lying. And that's what should tell anybody that's a weak case. You don't have to do that when you have a strong case. They did that with the cast. They did that with the timing advanced reports of Brian Kober. And that tells me that it's weak when you have to do that. You don't need to pad, like, hey, we're playing this shitty team, so I'm going to go in there and score 50, or go in there and score 40, to pad my stats. But meanwhile, if you look at the teams that are the tough teams in our league, and they're the top 5 teams in our league, I only can score 9 points against them, but I average 20 on the year. But against good teams, I average 9. Okay. It's because I'm going in there against these fucking shitty ass teams and blowing it up that way to get my average up like that. That's not indicative of that I'm a good scorer. That's shitty ass teams. So that's how I look at it. You don't have the evidence, so you made it up. But why would you need to make it up if the sheath is so powerful? Well, because we really kind of can't use the sheath, or I don't know. Becky says, after all of this, you're going to have to show me a picture of him in one of the bedrooms with a knife in his hand. Oh, here. You guys, there is the first person to put out a mainstream media law and crime did it. I was like so excited because I thought hey, they're going to talk about, what's going on and the new filings. Wait till you see this. I got to end on a laughing note. Okay. If you go to my post section, oh God. Post. Here, Brian Kober rips state over evidence in murder case. Okay. Here it is. Oh God, this is priceless.
That he had seen the records. So I think it's very messy, and I think you have a very good idea.
Okay, so
Just
have you guys seen this?
between having the records and not turning them over and not having them.
Okay, so
One eats places that one gets gas in Moscow. From the records, you can see handoffs, and so you know where a vehicle is going. You can know whether it's stationed. That AT&T records are produced by their Global Legal Demand Center, GLDC. AT&T GLDC did not begin producing timing advance records until May of 2023. The state has to know this to be true because in April of 2024, the state produced the actual records from AT&T and for cell towers and individual timing advance records for 2 of the 4 deceased and 1 for a person who had been a person witness such a deliberate attempt by prosecutors to mislead the court on evidence in plain sight. Anyone making such a claim would have to believe the court is incapable of reviewing physical evidence in possession of the state and the defense. It rises to a level beyond a simple miscommunication or oversight and is clear and intentional misrepresentation in the hopes to conceal a much larger issue. That sounds really ominous. So why are these records so important? Well, Brian Kohberger's attorneys say these records are more precise in showing a phone's location and will partially corroborate his alibi that he was at a park. And it has to do with what white car was seen on which surveillance cameras and when.
Okay.
In California. So a case like this could very well land in his lap. Philip, I want to know what you think off the bat about this whole issue about Cy Ray, the defense's cell phone expert, claiming that the state has these records. Somebody's got these records, whether it's the FBI or the cops or whomever, and they're just not turning them over. So the state's saying, no, those records weren't available back in 22. It seems kind of like a big mess.
Well, I think there's a difference between having the records and not turning them over and not having them at all. I'm going to give the prosecution the benefit of the doubt. When they say they don't have the records, I take them at their word. They say they don't have them. The real question is, why don't they have them? Did they fail to request them? If they failed to request them, I find it hard to believe that law enforcement did not tell them that they need to have those records or should have those records, because at a minimum, they could exculpate Brian Kohberger. It is standard practice, particularly in the last 5 years, to get location data, all location data from cell sites, from cell phone companies, to help locate the actual device at the time of a crime. And through a process called, I believe it's called trilateration, they can determine based on how the radio signal from the base reaches the phone and goes back to the base at the speed of light, where that phone is at all times. They can measure that. I find it a little suspicious that they didn't request it. Now, again, it's not to say that it was done on purpose, but I do think it could constitute a violation of due process. The bigger question, though, is to say why, is to ask why they insist that the records do not exist. Is it they do not exist right now because they let too much time go by to allow for the purgation of those records? Or did they in fact exist? They failed to ask for them, or they were told that they existed and never asked for them. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. And how you resolve it is you bring AT&T into court and you have them testify from their legal department, or
you bring AT&T and you put her asses up there. Yeah. Woo! That's exactly what you do. It's exactly what you do. You bring AT&T and Cy Ray doubled down, put his dick up on the table and said, I welcome you to bring them in there because I've already spoke with them. We're doing our due diligence over here. And they're saying, oh, wow, no way is that what's being said. Like, I think these AT&T people were like, whoa, wait, what?
From one of their records custodians departments.
Well, the state says, they requested them because there's like emails about this with the FBI, with Nick Ballance, the cell phone guru for the FBI, where he told them to request this stuff. So they requested it. The state's saying back then in December of 2022, the retention period was 7 days. Now it's 13 months. We requested Brian Kohberger's records on December 13th. The homicides happened on November 13th. So the 7 days was up. So therefore we don't have those records because they were gone. But, the defense is claiming that the lead investigator testified about this and said he had seen the records. So
there you go, girl, dropping that nutty. She just dropped a little nugget right there. It's exactly what he testified to. It's 100% exactly what he testified to, that he saw them because they mapped them. And then they buried them and they said, Ashley Jennings, we'll just get rid of that, those couple days there. And blah, 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 blah. So I can't wait to see who's going to tell on who. I can't wait. You guys, corruption's my thing. You should not be doing this job if you're a shitbag. Okay. You guys they have so much power. Shitbags cannot be in power like this.
I think it's very messy. And I think you have a very good idea about.
I think it's very messy. Thank you. Woo! Someone with some fucking balls and some tits. Give her hell. Woo! Angela, what's her name? Miss Levy. Oh, I wonder if she's related to big old brow guy.
Bringing AT&T in to say, yeah, we turned them over, or we didn't, or we had them, or they didn't request them. I
wrote on their channel and said, actually, Cy Ray pointed that out and said that AT&T did Boyd Jackson. His name's all over the documents. Boyd Jackson turned them over. They have them. Okay. They have them. And they didn't get them through the Legal Demand Center. They got them through the FBI and their relationship with the FBI. Like AT&T's relationship with the FBI.
Seems like this could be a pretty simple thing to get to the bottom of.
Yeah, and I'd like to see if the legal department, if specifically their custodian of records, actually received a demand for the records, either by way of subpoena, court order, or search warrant, and whether or not they responded by saying, after a diligent search, we cannot locate these records do not exist.
And what I wrote in, I was like, he doesn't know the case because all of that was in the documents. There is COAs. That's the big part about this, guys, is that Ashley Jennings is portraying that, hey, we got these COAs. And AT&T is saying that we did not get timing advance from for Brian Koberger through the GLD, through the Legal Demand Center. And so Ashley Jennings is pushing this narrative. Here, look, it's right here. Look at the CDAs or the COAs. Look at the certificate of authentication. It says it right here. See, we didn't get them this way. Meanwhile, knowing that you didn't get them that way, you little girl, you got them through the FBI's relationship. And you most certainly knew that because they were used. So this guy just doesn't know that.
Or alternatively, with a statement under oath in their declaration stating that our retention period is merely 7 days. We are not a perpetual repository of contents of cellular data. We do not have the capacity to store this data. The real question is, did they say it? Did the records in fact exist? And if they did, and the state failed to double down and try to get those records, I think it's outrageous. And frankly, I think at a minimum, they should get a jury instruction with an adverse inference against the state that they're playing games.
Okay. They should get a jury instruction. Oh my God, a jury instruction that they're playing games. Quit playing games, ho. That's a song.
Well, we're going to wait and see how it all unfolds because there's going to be a big hearing next week on April 9th where they're going to hash all of this out. So let's move on now to the other big piece of this whole cell phone thing.
Okay.
And they're saying, the defense is saying basically that the cell phone analysis of Nick Balance shouldn't be allowed. He is saying that Brian Koberger's phone was within a football field of the King Road house on 23 occasions between July and November of 2022. So Ann Taylor had said in an earlier hearing that phone, he was in Moscow, but that phone was never stationary at that house. So he was not stalking anybody in the house or anything like that. But this Nick Balance is going to testify. He did these drive tests. He did all of this analysis, and that phone was within 100 meters of that King Road house. Ann Taylor says this shouldn't be allowed. He hasn't disclosed his methodology. We don't know how he reached these conclusions, et cetera. Your thoughts on that? Because that seems like a really, really bad fact for the defense if his phone is that close to the house 23 times.
Yeah, and all the more reason for needing and wanting that timing advanced data, because that would resolve it. Now, having said that, I think the reason why this is a critical issue for the defense is because if they have proof that he was within, let's say, 100 meters of the house on 23 separate occasions, unannounced, uninvited, it certainly raises the specter of him casing the place and that this was premeditated and long thought out way before the murders. So what they need to do is they need to get their own expert. They need to get their own expert, such as Cy Ray, to take the stand and talk about margins of error, meaning just because the state says that he was within 100 meters doesn't mean it's true. If the margin of error can show...
Actually, see, this is just, he doesn't have enough of the documents. Actually, what Cy Ray is going to show is that they never mapped from June of 2022 to, December of 2022. There's no report of it. They didn't do it. It doesn't exist. Him testifying that this happened 23 times. And what Cy Ray is going to testify to is that, no, what you're seeing there is you're seeing handoffs and that this car, it's continuously moving. That's what I believe Cy Ray is going to be. That's what handoffs are, is that you can tell that a car is continuing to move. It's all lies.
Show that maybe he was a third of a mile away, a quarter of a mile away, or a half a mile away. That is not proof of casing. That is not proof of just sort of staking out the property. It just means you're in the vicinity, And I think that in the end, it could become a battle of the experts, but all the more reason why the defense needs that data.
Let's move on now to all of these issues that Brian Koberger has. The state does not want any neuropsychological evidence introduced at trial. They filed a motion saying no dice. The defense says, no, we should be able to tell the jury that he has autism spectrum disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and something else called developmental coordination.
Okay, does she talk about, let's see.
They're essentially admitting guilt. By doing that, you're saying, look, my client did it, but give him a break. He's not morally reprehensible because... What?
That's not what they're saying at all. Read the documents. Like, what the fuck?
He has prosody in speech, uses repetitive phrases in large words.
They're saying that's not true at all. They're saying that they want the jury to know that he has this because they're going to be watching his every move. And when he's not being socially like the way that you want him to be, just remember that this is what he has. I mean, wow.
Words and has developmental dexterity problems. I mean, does that matter? Can't they just coach him even if he's got some issues because he has this level 1 autism spectrum disorder? Can't they work with him, Philip? I'm playing devil's advocate here. Or is it really that bad that they may not be able to help address these things?
Well, it's a great question. In other words, does it matter is really sort of a layperson's way of asking, is it relevant? And the legal definition of relevance is that a fact or some offer of proof has a tendency and reason to prove or disprove a disputed fact.
Okay, he's reading something off of a screen. So it's so scripted. Let's see the next thing. I'm good on that. Okay. Mr. Kober has sleep difficulties and subsequently developed a habit of night driving or running to decompress.
Driving or running to decompress, such behaviors being present most of his life. He also engages in frequent compulsive hand washing. He wears gloves to avoid germs, has a fear of things getting into his eyes. He changes his shower curtain frequently to avoid exposure to mold and avoids anything he views as contaminating. If the state elicits testimony at trial related to these types of facts that are used to build circumstantially the elements of the crime or show Mr. Koberger's actions as reflecting his state of mind or other elements of the crime, he will refute that evidence through expert testimony as behaviors related to his OCD and his ASD. And then they go on to mention the fact that Brian Koberger was putting his garbage at the house in Pennsylvania when he was arrested. He was putting his garbage in baggies and he was wearing.
That's not what he was doing. Well, according to the state. But the state actually has never said this. The state has never said that. That's what police put out there to mainstream media to run with, okay? He was washing his bathroom. If you want, that's what the defense says.
Gloves, and the state's going to say he was doing that so he wouldn't leave his DNA anywhere, and the defense is like, no, he's OCD, he just does this stuff.
No, he was what?
And I think it's well taken, to be honest. Remember, they're introducing evidence against him, evidence of guilt. And remember, the definition of relevance is, does the offer of proof have a tendency and reason to prove or disprove a disputed fact? If the fact is it's all premeditation, he's using gloves, he's trying to conceal the evidence, he's trying to prevent detection of evidence, but you can refute that and counter it by showing, no, that's not what he's doing. He's a germaphobe. You know, he gets creeped out by microorganisms. That's just how he lives. He swaps out a shower curtain regularly. You know, he doesn't shake hands with a bare hand. He doesn't touch doorknobs. He doesn't even like opening up his own garbage can. And if he does, he wears gloves or he has a napkin in his hand. I think that is fair game to rebut it. Otherwise, it just leaves it out in the open that he's trying to go undetected. So I think that should come in for that purpose. But I don't think either side should be able to mention it in their opening statement. It should only become an issue once the prosecution intends to introduce that evidence. Unless and until they do, then the defense's ability to rebut it legally is irrelevant. You have to wait until it becomes relevant.
Mm-hmm. And next, they say he has developmental coordination disorder. Let's put this other slide up on the screen. It says the state has disclosed evidence that law enforcement will testify they did test runs at 1122 King Road and that it is possible to commit 4 homicides in a time frame of only minutes, including.
You guys, their test runs is what I was talking about earlier about Gilbertson. Gilbertson counting off, like what? Gilbertson? I think this guy is pretty fair, to be honest. Oh, hell yeah, he's being fair. This is the first time people are talking about it in this type of a fair manner. I agree. I just think that they have some of the facts wrong. But the overall gist of it, she's saying this is sloppy, like absolutely. And when they start talking about this, if they get more in depth with what read those docs, baby, read those docs. I just can't believe that people can come out and talk about stuff and not review the material. Like, isn't that just weird? How do you?
Walking to and from a car and removing clothing that would be covered in blood. So they think that he took bloody clothes off. That's going to be part of the state's theory, and then got in his car and drove away. Then they then continue to write, it will be relevant for the jury to know that Mr. Koberger has a developmental coordination disorder that impacts his fine motor dexterity and visual motor functions. Such speed and coordination are not possible for him. So they're saying basically, Philip, he can't go into a house and kill a bunch of college.
And then Coffindaffer here goes on News Nation and is saying that Brian Koberger can run 6-minute miles. Okay. And it's from a screenshot. This is what's crazy. This is from a screenshot. How would Jennifer Coffindaffer have a screenshot of Brian Koberger's cell phone data from like an app? because he was sharing it in some app.
Kids who are drunk, heavily intoxicated, with a huge knife because he's got this dexterity disorder, developmental coordination disorder.
Well, if the prosecution is going to introduce evidence that he did have, in fact, the ability to do this within that time frame, that limited time frame, then really what they're trying to do is offer up a reenactment. And reenactments, either through testimony or demonstrations, have to be a fair, accurate, reasonable depiction of what really occurred. You can't just have somebody come in and just do a recreation without any specific facts. So
he went in the house and just started counting off numbers. Then he doesn't turn over the discovery on his reports on this. So nobody will be reenacting that because, I mean, he's absolutely right when he says that you have to make it where's the reliability? What did you do?
And reenactments, either through testimony or demonstrations, have to be a fair, accurate, reasonable depiction of what really occurred. You can't just have somebody come in and just do a recreation without any specific facts. So, for example, if the person who's doing the reenactment had met with Mr. Koberger and garnered information from him, had him walk about, had him do his own sample walks back and forth, circle around, then there is a basis, a reasonable scientific basis to suggest that their depiction is fair, accurate, and reliable. But otherwise, I think it has a tendency to mislead the jury. Jurors are hung up on junk science. They really are. And someone takes a stand and says, oh, he has the right build, he has the right stature, he can do this, he has the right weight, the height, he has the bushy brows, look at the length of his arms, look at the fact that he had that scabbard through Amazon, and just try to tie in all these nuggets to suggest that he had the physical wherewithal to do it, I think is junk science. That's my own opinion. So in response, the defense has to be able to counter it. If they're not allowed to counter it, the judge shouldn't even let it in to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, that seems fair.
And then Ann Taylor says that they destroyed the house. So now we can't even, there was no way for us to counter it because they wrecked the house. And so that's why I think it's out just right there off the rip.
The state counters by saying, well, yeah, he used to have these issues in the past and it had to do with him not being able to tie a shoe and then bad handwriting and stuff like that. They also, Philip, the defense did scans of his brain and they said, this shows this is not like a mental health thing. This is more like he's got some structural issues in his brain. So, but I think that's more mitigation evidence than anything. Philip, thank you so much for coming on. As always, I appreciate your time.
Yeah. There you go. It would be an Ohio chick.
Has to do with Brian Koberger's cell phone and a very specific set of records. Koberger's lawyers are accusing prosecutors of holding back evidence about his cell phone location records, and they're using fighting words in doing so. Koberger maintains he's innocent and that he didn't murder Maddie Mogan, Kayla Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle at the house on King Road in November of 2022. The records that Koberger's lawyers and his cell phone expert want are called timing advance records. Koberger had an AT&T phone, and his lawyers say those records will accurately pinpoint where his phone was and the direction that he was driving on the night of the murders. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth in court documents about these records. In fact, the state asked Judge Hippler to bar the defense from even mentioning these records during the trial. Prosecutor Ashley Jennings wrote, "The state has been advised and will offer documentation and or testimony."
I love it. I love how she said Ashley Jennings. Hell yeah. Fucking put a name to it. Don't just say the prosecution. You guys, the first time I've ever seen, look at this. Brian Koberger rips state over evidence in murder case. Dude, first time you see a headline like that, give it up for Crime Fix, Anjanette Levy, first person to do it. First person to do it.
That AT&T records are produced by their Global Legal Demand Center, GLDC. AT&T GLDC did not begin producing timing advance records until May of 2023. All records for defendant's phone were obtained from GLDC in December 2022. So that's what prosecutors said back in February. And they claimed that allowing Koberger to tell the jury that additional evidence could have been provided and wasn't was a mischaracterization. The defense fired back, saying it agreed partially with the prosecutors, but only partially.
Can you believe that she had the fucking nuts to say that in the goddamn motion? Like, that motion that she filed, that's what should have her disbarred. She fucking, damn. There is no way, with all eyes on you, the world is watching, okay? She files that shit, and you think that she hasn't done this a million times before that when nobody's watching in that laid top podunk fucking town, right? Think about that, people. Come on.
The lawyers wrote, "The state is misleading the court in its motion by what it leaves out. What the state is not saying is that the timing advance records existed at AT&T in November and December of 2022. The state has to know this to be true because in April of 2024, the state produced the actual records from AT&T and for cell towers and individual timing advance records for 2 of the 4 deceased and 1 for a person who had been a person of interest at the beginning of the investigation, as well as over 3,800 people on the cell tower. These records were from November of 2022 and were produced in discovery to Mr. Koberger in 2024. Now, there's a bit of a catch here. The defense says the state has these records, but the state says it doesn't. Prosecutors wrote in response, regarding AT&T, before June of 2023, AT&T retained timing advance records for 7 days. These records were not routinely provided in response to legal demand prior to June of 2023. After June of 2023, AT&T started providing these records pursuant to legal demand and began retaining timing advance records for 13 months. This is a law and crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and
All right. Okay, guys, that's enough. First time. Woo, give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Give it up. I speeded her up. I put her on drugs. Oh, Tanda, thank you so much. $20 for Because You Rock. Thank you so much. This trial is going to be whack. 8 ball. 8-baller. You guys, this trial is going to be, I mean, Ashley Jennings, the fucking cahoons on that broad to just come up and say, oh, and for the record, guys, I have to show you what I did today. I had fun and I was making a little thumbnail, but then I saw who Anjanette Levy had on, and I was like, oh my God, I want to get a picture of him. So, did you guys see News Nation's Ashley Banfield and there we go. Hold on. Oh gosh, share this. Okay, we're gonna play a game called Name Me the First Person in Hollywood you think of when you see him. Ready? Want me to tell you mine? This trial will be in Vegas. What? It's going to be in Vegas. Who do we think? Oh, no. Pacino. Come on, ready? You guys are going to love my answer. Ready? 100% Tom Green. All day Tom Green. Tom Green. Oh, yeah, Tom Green. Tom Green. What do you think? That's my thought anyways. Let's see. Did you guys see Lori Vallow go off? She's not wrong. Did I see Lori Vallow go off? Lori Daybell, whatever. When she wanted to get the, where's that one where she, where is, okay, here. Okay. Let's see.
Mr. Eaton apparently is a reporter in Idaho, and based on the filings, believes he doesn't have any relevant.
There's several things off the top of my head that is relevant. Right now, one of the things is it's different now, right? Because he's had this off the record conversation with the prosecutor, and he's kind of made himself a witness. He's kind of made her a witness.
How so?
In the sense that if this is not prosecutorial misconduct, then one of them is going to have to testify and talk about how it's not.
Let's back up. How is he a witness?
One of them is going to have to testify because this is prosecutorial misconduct. Then she talks about her witness list, which is very interesting.
Beginning of this, he says that it seems to be clear attempt by Mrs. Daybell to use the rules of criminal procedure as a pretext simply to keep me out of the courtroom and interfere with my ability to report. So I had to laugh at that because it hadn't even occurred to me that he wouldn't be able to be in the courtroom if he was a witness according to 615. So that wasn't my intention. It was never my intention to do that. It was just to have him on hand if we needed to do that.
All right.
Okay, so then I want to hear this part when she talks about her dad being
if it comes.
It's taking her word for that. That's what happened. She's not under oath saying that that's what happened.
wait, hold on.
Can be present if he so chooses in the courtroom.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The next one is legal advice to the defense witness Nate Eaton. We've somewhat discussed that, but I think their motion, the state says that they simply notified him that he would need to be served with a subpoena to have to appear in court. So how is that improper?
It's taking her word for that. That's what happened. She's not under oath saying that that's what happened. Nate Eaton's not here to testify that that's what happened. They're the only two parties that are there to say that that is what happened. So that is my problem with it. I would like for one of them to get on the stand and say exactly what happened in that conversation and that she wasn't giving him legal advice. How do we know that she wasn't? It's a very curious situation that he called her and then he writes in his motion this statement that obviously comes from Ms. K. She seems to be a clear attempt by Ms. Abel to use the rules of criminal procedure as a pretext simply to keep me out of the courtroom and interfere with my ability to report. We also don't know if he told her, don't come to the March 18th hearing because that's when they're going to serve you with your subpoena. So all these things come from there and we don't know who's saying it. And you're just taking her word for it. Like you took her word for, oh, there's only 6 emails and there's no other emails. You're just taking her word for it as an officer of the court. And I think that she should have to be sworn in.
Well, you want me to just take your word for he must have gotten these things from Ms. K. Okay. Just because his motion says he thinks that you're noticing him as a witness to keep him out of the courtroom. I don't know why you take the jump to that is coming from Ms. K as opposed to his own volition. He also hired an attorney that said the same thing.
Just a little piece. All right, guys. Until next time, guys. Peace out. Peace out. Deuces. Be kind. Rewind. What a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think it's a very interesting case. I don't know how much stuff they have on her to be able to prove it. I can't believe she's representing herself when she could totally have somebody. Well, she has a second chair, just so you know. Yep, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe. Woo, yeah. 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 Thank you, guys. See you soon. Thank you, moderators. You guys rock. Oh, yep. She has her own YouTube. Oh, wait, let me read that one. Harris says, Levy has her own channel on YouTube, told her to watch her channel, blah, blah, blah. She responds. She asked me if Lance calling Payne a liar. I said, yes. Saw her on Bob's channel. Yeah, he lied. They all lied. Everybody's a liar. Everybody except everybody here is a liar. Oh, God. But the more that's coming back from when we're peeling the onion back is it's like maybe Payne isn't the liar. And I mean, I know that Ashley Jennings is a liar. You liar. So. Oh, yes. Yeah, message cut off on comments. Oh, okay. Well, I would love to bullshit with her about the Idaho4 case because with her platform on law and crime, she could actually, talk about the fuckerage in the case. So. All right, guys, until next time, thank you for that, Miss Harris. Lisa, member. Steve and his family started off doing a more thorough investigation than law enforcement at the beginning of the case. Correct. Rootin' Tootin' Newton. I love that name. Damn, Rootin' Tootin' Newton. How did I miss that? That's a fucking sweet name. Mikey, Lana, no. Mata, rescheduled. Yes. I had my popcorn ready. It's okay. Yes, we love Bob. Sherry, 16 months. Woo-wee. Laura, some of the frat guys are also volunteer firefighters. Yes, they are. Blue-eyed Candy. that picture really puts 3 feet in perspective. She was literally in slashing distance, and he would have eliminated the witness, not wasting a second. I know, right? Doesn't that picture really like, wow, you know? This is going to take a jury with unbiased common sense, in my opinion. Yeah. I think like anything, it depends on how things are presented and what is allowed to be presented. But there's a lot of holes. Lindsay. Oh, thank you. You always ask the right questions and make the best points. Thanks for your hard work and brains. We all appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you back there. Lindsay, May, 12 months. It's a year, folks. We're all my super freaks. Sherry, thanks for all the awesomeness and hard work. Thank you, Sherry. And again, thanks, my girl, Miss Harris. Turn the chat green. Woo! All right, guys. Thank you. Silent. How is it possible that police arrive on the scene while the 911 call is still in progress? Yet even it's so close, you guys. It's literally it's like right there. Yet even the office only says one person is deceased despite Ethan being there. Yeah. Them getting there fast, I mean, they're not doing much. You know, it's a slow Sunday, as I said. Backwood Beats. What's up? I thought the stalker was the vape shop guy now, but who knows? Yeah, that guy was a little out there, wasn't he? Ashley Jennings tried to pull the unthinkable, which was to come out and do a motion in limine to keep out the timing advance records and talk about wow. Meanwhile, in the previous hearing, you heard her. She's like, that's for a jury. Look, we'll do that. Well, clearly Ashley Jennings was like lying then to the judge, even that, no, that's going to be for a trial. Like, you know, talking about where the car, whatever. Like, it's just a difference of opinion. Remember her? Then she goes and files that motion limine. Tell me you ain't a liar without telling me that you're a liar. All right, guys. Peace out.